Chapter 1927. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xu Wang's expression became even more respectful. She was now convinced that Yi Xian was at the destiny-knowing stage. Even Old Man Profound Secrets had bowed to him, so how could it be fake? When the two disappeared into the distance, Xiong Ho appeared in front of the city gates. Not only her, but goddess Shenqin also appeared beside her. Xiong Ho glanced at Shenqin, smiled, and said nothing. Shenqin was expressionless. "You're just going to let him keep pretending?" Xiong Ho hurriedly said, "If you can't stand it, then go and deal with him." Shenqin was silent. She wanted to deal with Yi Xian, but she was also wary. This guy was not a kind soul. Xiong Ho smiled. "It's fine, let him keep pretending. Let's see how long he can keep pretending." Shenqin turned to look behind her, expressionless. A bunch of fools. With that, she turned and left. Xiong Ho shook her head. Actually, if she did not know about Yi Xian's background, she might have been fooled too. Yi Xian's azure profound sword and that mysterious spacetime really exceeded the understanding of primordial spirit realm powerhouses. It was also because of this that Yi Xian could fool Old Man Profound Secrets. But what puzzled her was why Yi Xian was fine after taking two of Xu Wang's swords head-on. How did he do it? Xiong Ho was puzzled. Under Xu Wang's guidance, Yi Xian arrived at the dark forest. Standing in front of the forest, Yi Xian fell silent. He finally knew why this place was called the Dark Forest. Because it was really dark. The forest stretched as far as the eye could see, and all the trees were pitch black, as if they had been splashed with ink. Yi Xian turned to look at Xu Wang. "Is there anything special about this dark forest?" Xu Wang nodded. "This place is very dangerous because there are spirits of darkness inside, an extremely special kind of being. This dark forest is their territory, and they do not welcome other beings." Yi Xian looked at the dark forest in silence. He wanted to go in, but he knew that once he did, he would probably be in big trouble. Beside him, Su Wang saw that Yi Xian was silent and did not say anything. After a short while, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Hypocrisy, is there a king in this dark forest?" Xu Wang nodded. "The king of darkness is the ruler of the dark forest." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." As he spoke, he asked again, "Who are these people who are chasing after the woman I'm looking for?" Xu Wang spoke in a low voice, "The most important ones are King Martial Spirit and Zhao Shenshao. Both of them are peak soul formation realm experts. Besides the two of them, there are many other mysterious experts. All of them want to obtain the sky split or in that woman's possession." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." With that, he walked towards the dark forest. Seeing this, Xu Wang hesitated for a moment before he followed. With this senior around, what was there to be afraid of? King of Darkness? In front of a destiny-knowing expert, he was like a little brother. After they stepped foot into the dark forest, Yi Xian frowned because it was extraordinarily cold and gloomy here. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly passed the green profound sword to Xu Wang, "Kill anyone that doesn't know what's good for them." Xu Wang hurriedly nodded, and then he received the green profound sword. At the moment she held it in her hand, her bearing had changed completely. Even though she was only at the life god realm, she felt like she was invincible right now. This sword had improved her strength by more than 10 times at the very least. Right at this moment, a black tree in the distance suddenly started wriggling, and then a black figure gradually appeared before them. The figure was completely pitch black, and only its eyes emanated a ghastly blue glow. Xu Wang spoke in a low voice by Yi Xian's side, "The spirit of darkness, should we kill him?" Yi Xian turned around to glance at Xu Wang, and then he said, "We have to convince him with virtue first, and we'll kill him if he's not convinced." Xu Wang nodded, "I understand." Yi Xian gazed at the spirit of darkness, "I want to see your king." The spirit of darkness ridiculed, "See our king?" Are you even worthy? Yi Xian turned around to look at Xiuwang. You can kill him now. Xiuwang directly vanished on the spot. Hiss. The spirit of darkness didn't even have the chance to react before it was wiped out. After he stopped, Xiuwang looked at the green profound sword in his hand, and he was slightly excited. This feeling was simply too awesome. It could be said that he was invincible amongst those of the same realm with this sword. Yi Xian glanced into the distance, and he laughed. King of Darkness, you sure are arrogant. His voice was like thunder, and the surrounding tree of darkness trembled violently. However, there was no response. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step forward before he said, King of Darkness, if you don't come out in 10 breaths of time, then I'll flatten your dark forest. Xiuwang's blood started to boil slightly when he heard Yi Xian's words. How domineering. Following a big shot is so awesome. However, there was still no response. Breath after breath passed. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Damn it. Is this fellow really not going to come out? If he doesn't come out, then would I really have to destroy the dark forest? With my current strength, it's quite difficult to flatten the dark forest. Right when 10 breaths of time were about to end, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared here. It's here. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared not far away from Yi Xian and Xiuwang. The middle-aged man was dressed a little strangely. His hair was standing up like a broom. Not only that, but his clothes were also made of leaves. He looked like a treant. Xiuwang, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke in a low voice, King of Darkness. King of Darkness glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said, I heard a life-knower realm expert has arrived in the city. Is that you? Yi Xian smiled. This isn't a suitable place to talk. Let's go somewhere else. King of Darkness frowned slightly. Somewhere else? Yi Xian nodded. Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared within it. After that, he brought Xiuwang along with him and entered Xiao Ta. King of Darkness hesitated for a moment, and then he entered Xiao Ta as well. When they entered Xiao Ta, King of Darkness and Xiuwang's expressions instantly changed. King of Darkness glanced at the surroundings, and he felt slight disbelief. The space here is actually completely different from the outside world. Moreover, the flow of time. As he spoke up to this point, he started to speak incoherently. Because this had exceeded his understanding. King of Darkness looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, this is a special space that I created. It's usually used by my juniors to cultivate. King of Darkness hesitated for a moment, and then he said, I admire senior's ability. Yi Xian frowned slightly, you don't know? King of Darkness was slightly embarrassed. I'm only at the nascent soul realm, and I haven't come into contact with such a divine ability. Yi Xian nodded slightly, right. But it's fine, we can take it slowly. King of Darkness hurriedly said, Senior, you're right. Yi Xian made an inviting gesture. Please take a seat. King of Darkness was slightly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, and he hurriedly said, Senior, please. Smiling, Yi Xian said, let's sit together. As soon as he finished speaking, he sat down. King of Darkness didn't sit, and he stood instead. Yi Xian gazed at King of Darkness, and King of Darkness hurriedly said, I like to stand. Yi Xian smiled, what's your name? King of Darkness replied, Mu Senior. Yi Xian nodded, Mu Senator. I came to Dark Forest this time to look for someone. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and Sister Shue's portrait appeared in his hand. You should have seen her, right? Mu Sen was slightly stunned when he saw Sister Shue's portrait. It's her. Yi Xian asked, do you know her? Mu Sen nodded, I have. She came to Dark Forest a month ago, and 2 people were chasing after her. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Sen. You didn't do anything to her, right? Mu Sen hurriedly said, no. After she entered Dark Forest, I didn't make things difficult for her. On the contrary, I made her leave. Yi Xian frowned. She left? Mu Sun nodded. She went to the wasteland. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on, and he turned to look at Su Wang. Su Wang spoke in a low voice, I'm not familiar with the wasteland, and I've only heard of it. As she spoke, she gazed at Mu Sun. You should be more familiar with the King of Darkness. Mu Sun spoke in a low voice, the wasteland is slightly special. It's the territory of the wasteland god, and he has an extremely strange temper. He's not easy to get along with. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. Do I have to go to the wasteland to act cool again? He might seem fearless now, but he was actually panicking deep down. Meanwhile, Mu Sun spoke abruptly, Senior, I'm willing to take you to the wasteland. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Sun, won't that be troublesome for you? Mu Sun grinned, it's my honor to be able to serve Senior. Yi Xian smiled, then I'll be troubling you. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Mu Sun and Su Wang away from Xiao Ta. After leaving Xiao Ta, Mu Sun sighed with emotion. The space-time in Xiao Ta's world was really different from the space-time in reality. As if he'd thought of something, Mu Sun gazed at Yi Xian, Senior, what's the difference between the space-time in Xiao Ta's world and the space-time in the outside world? Yi Xian smiled, 10 years in there is equivalent to a day in the outside world. Mu Sun and Su Wang were dumbstruck when they heard this. 10 years in there is equivalent to a day in the outside world? At this moment, tempestuous waves were surging through their hearts. Even the word, heaven-defying, wasn't enough to describe such a divine treasure. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly asked, is it very difficult? Mu Sun laughed bitterly, it's far more than difficult. Perhaps it's very simple for Senior, but it's as difficult as ascending the heavens for us. Especially the space-time in Xiao Ta's world. I've lived for so long and studied space-time for so long, but I've never seen or heard of such a space-time. Yi Xian smiled, actually, it's not that difficult. It's just that both of you haven't come into contact with it. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, actually, attaining the destiny realm isn't that difficult. As he spoke up to this point, he didn't continue. If he did, then his act of acting tough would be exposed. Mu Sun's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He bowed respectfully to Yi Xian and said, please guide me, Senior. If you're able to provide me with some guidance, then I'll never forget your kindness. Yi Xian fell silent. How the fuck should I guide you? P.S. Because it's New Year, I've been going around to pay my respects, so I didn't have time to write. So, the explosion on the 15th will be delayed. Everyone, please forgive me. Because I really have to pay my respects everywhere. Everyone whose home understands. Chapter 1928. Instruction. Xuang also looked at Yi Xian with excitement. Instruction from a life-knowing realm big shot. This was a rare opportunity that only appeared once in 10,000 years. While Xuang and Mu Sun were waiting expectantly, Yi Xian smiled. Then let's talk about the space-time Tao. Mu Sun hurriedly said, please instruct us, Senior. Yi Xian looked at Mu Sun and smiled. I'll just talk about it casually. You two listen as you please. How much you can comprehend will depend on yourselves. As he spoke, he opened his palm and pressed it down lightly. In an instant, a mysterious space-time enveloped Mu Sun and Xuang. Mu Sun and Xuang's expressions changed when they were enveloped by the mysterious space-time. This was a space-time that they had never come into contact with before. Yi Xian smiled. Do you know what space-time this is? Mu Sun and Xuang shook their heads. Yi Xian thought to himself, actually, I don't know either. Of course, he couldn't say that. He smiled and said, this is called the Azure Spacetime, a brand new spacetime that I created myself. Mu Sun was shocked. You created it, Senior? Yi Xian nodded. Of course. Mu Sun bowed slightly. Senior's methods are truly mysterious. Xiuwang was in awe as well, and he admired Yi Xian even more. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Since you are so smart, I won't say anything more. Feel it yourselves. I believe you'll gain a lot." Both of them closed their eyes slowly and sensed Yi Xian's mysterious spacetime. Yi Xian looked at them and heaved a sigh of relief. Damn it! I'm going to walk the path of acting cool to the end. Not only must I act cool, I must act well. Xiong Ho and Shen Qin looked into the distance, and their expressions were not good. They realized that Mu Sun was actually very respectful to Yi Xian. Obviously, Mu Sun had been tricked by Yi Xian as well. Shen Qin said in a low voice, "This guy is too good at tricking." Xiong Ho was silent. She was also a little speechless. She had never seen someone so good at bluffing. Meanwhile, Shen Qin spoke in a low voice, "The King of Darkness is an idiot as well." He actually believed that this guy was in the life-knowing state. That's too stupid. Xiong Ho glanced at the divine quilt. "I think you are the idiot." Shen Qin looked at Xiong Ho with an unfriendly expression. Xiong Ho said, "It's not that Old Man Profound and the King of Darkness are stupid, it's that he has that divine sword and that mysterious spacetime. Not to mention them, even you and I might be intimidated by him if we don't know his background." The divine quilt fell silent. Xiong Ho continued, "Of course, this guy is also good at bluffing, and he's also very bold. To be honest, I do admire him a little." Shen Qin glanced at Xiong Ho and sneered, "Admire him? Are you impressed by his ability to fool people?" Xiong Ho licked her sugar-coated haws, and then she said, "Shen Qin, if you were in the same realm of cultivation as him, then with the level of intelligence you possess, you would probably be completely toyed with by him." Shen Ho was expressionless. "You and him are jackals of the same tribe." Xiong Ho laughed, "You're just a hypocrite." Shen Qin's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's fight?" Xiong Ho shrugged, "Bring it on." In next to no time, the two of them started fighting. On the other side, Yi Xian slowly withdrew his right hand, and the mysterious spacetime vanished. After a long time, Mu Sen's eyes slowly opened, and he said softly, "The Tao of spacetime has no end." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly, "Thank you, Senior, for sharing this spacetime. I've gained a lot." Yi Xian smiled, "It's no big deal." Mu Sen shook his head, "It's a small matter to Senior, but it's a huge matter to me. No matter what, I, Mu Sen, will never forget Junior's guidance today." Yi Xian smiled, "Then I might have to trouble you to take me to that woman I'm looking for." Mu Sen hurriedly said, "Of course." Yi Xian said, "Let's go." Mu Sen hurriedly led the way. It didn't take long for the three of them to leave the dark forest. All along the way, Mu Sen and Xiuwang were extremely respectful to Yi Xian. Now, they firmly believed that Yi Xian was at the destiny-knowing state. It didn't take long for the three of them to arrive at the wasteland. Yi Xian looked up, and he couldn't see the end of the boundless wasteland. Moreover, dark gray sand drifted through the sky. Occasionally, violent winds would whistle by, and the sand would instantly cover the entire sky. Mu Sen spoke in a low voice, "Senior, the wasteland is up ahead, the territory of the wasteland god." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "Ask him to come out." Mu Sen hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior, the wasteland god has a bad temper, so he might." Yi Xian suddenly smiled, "If he doesn't cooperate, then just kill him." Mu Sen's expression changed slightly. He'd almost forgotten that this was a big shot at the destiny-knowing state. Mu Sen didn't think too much about it, and he looked up into the sky and said, "Wasteland God, come out and meet me." There was no response. Mu Sen frowned when he saw this. Mu Sen added, "Wasteland God." His voice rumbled like thunder, and it caused the entire wasteland to tremble violently. Suddenly, a furious shout resounded from afar, "Which bastard dares to bark in my wasteland?" Mu Sen's face instantly darkened when he heard this. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Sen. "Get him." Mu Sen was slightly hesitant. Yi Xian smiled, "What are you afraid of when I'm here?" Mu Sen smiled, "Since Senior has said that, then let's get him." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. Bang! In an instant, the sky in the distance dimmed down, and then a powerful force swept through the wasteland like a tide. Suddenly, a furious shout resounded from the depths of the wasteland, "Mu Sen, have you gone mad?" Rumble. The wasteland in the distance suddenly exploded apart, and then a spatial abyss appeared. Mu Sen and the wasteland god stood facing each other within the spatial abyss. The wasteland god stared fixedly at Mu Sen. "Mu Sen, we've always minded our own business. What's gotten into you today?" Mu Sen spoke coldly, "I can't stand the sight of you, alright?" As he spoke, he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The space where the wasteland god resided was instantly transformed into a spatial vortex. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through the wasteland god's eyes, and then he charged forward while a powerful force shot out explosively. Rumble. Countless strands of space shattered in the distant sky, and then strands of powerful force surged incessantly towards the surroundings. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he witnessed this scene. Because the aftershock of the powerful force was surging towards him. Run? How embarrassing would it be to run? I can only go head-on against it. Yi Xian took a step forward and activated his sword domain. Invincible sword domain. Bang! The space around Yi Xian and Su Wang were instantly obliterated. On the other hand, Yi Xian and Su Wang were completely unscathed. Su Wang gazed at Yi Xian with shock in his heart. As expected of a Destiny Realm expert, he was actually able to remain unmoving under such circumstances. Moreover, that sword domain from before was extremely profound, and it was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary sword domain. He's really a big shot. Yi Xian's face was extremely pale as he stood before Su Wang. Actually, if he were to attack, then the aftershock of the force wouldn't have been sufficient to cause him such internal injuries. However, he couldn't attack. He would definitely be exposed once he attacked. Regardless of whether it was Su Wang or Mu Sen, both of them weren't ordinary figures. So, he could only resist them head-on. Fortunately, he was able to resist them even if he didn't attack. This allowed him to have a rough understanding of his own strength. His true combat strength was still a distance away from these soul formation realm experts, but it wasn't a huge gap. After all, he was able to utilize the spatial pressure of that mysterious space. Right at this moment, Mu Sen and the wasteland god suddenly stopped moving. The wasteland god stared fixedly at Mu Sen. "Mu Sen, have you gone mad?" Mu Sen spoke furiously, "I just can't stand the sight of you." The wasteland god frowned slightly as if he'd thought of something, and then he turned around to look at Yi Xian and Su Wang. His frown deepened when he saw Yi Xian, the seamless path. As he spoke, he gazed at Mu Sen. "Why did you bring an ant here?" Mu Sen's expression changed drastically when he heard this. "You're the ant. Your entire family is filled with ants." The wasteland god frowned. "What's wrong with you?" Mu Sen stared fixedly at the wasteland god. "This is Senior Yi Xian. You actually dare to call him an ant? Wasteland god, have you lived for too long? Senior?" The wasteland god spoke in a low voice. "Mu Sen, is there something wrong with your brain? You actually called an ant from the seamless path Senior?" Mu Sen glanced coldly at the wasteland god. "You really are an idiot." The wasteland god spoke in a low voice. "Mu Sen, what exactly is wrong with you?" Mu Sen was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look at Su Wang. "Kill him." Su Wang was stunned, and then he drew his sword. Hiss! A strand of sword energy tore through the surroundings. A wisp of viciousness flashed through the wasteland god's eyes, a mere life god realm cultivator dares to attack me? You're courting death. As he spoke, he suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Bang! An expanse of sword energy was blasted apart while the wasteland god was pushed over 3 kilometers back. When he finally stopped moving, his entire right arm had been split into 2. The wasteland god was stunned by this scene. My arm was split apart by a single strike from an ant at the life god realm? It wasn't just the wasteland god, even Mu Sen was quite shocked. Su Wang's combat strength actually became so terrifying after he obtained this senior sword. Even though Su Wang was pushed back as well, her eyes were filled with excitement. She was confident in her ability to kill a nascent soul realm expert right now. The boost from the sword in his hand was simply too terrifying. Su Wang was about to attack again, but Yi Xian suddenly said, "Stand down for now." Hearing Yi Xian's words, Wang Kai did not hesitate at all. He turned around and turned into a beam of sword light that landed behind Yi Xian. The wilderness god frowned slightly at the sight of this, and he gazed at Yi Xian. "Who are you?" At this moment, he also realized that Yi Xian was not simple. Yi Xian smiled and looked at Mu Senior. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" Mu Sen was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, "Wasteland God, this is Senior Yi Xian, a fate knower." Fate-knowing state? The wilderness god was stunned when he heard this. Meanwhile, Yi Xian gazed at the wilderness god and said, "Let me ask you a question. I'll obliterate you if you answer me wrongly." As he spoke, he took a step forward, and a mysterious spacetime enveloped the god of wilderness. The wasteland god's expression changed drastically. Chapter 1929. What sort of spacetime is this? The god's eyes were filled with shock. Could this fellow really be a Destiny Realm expert? Yi Xian gazed at the god, and then he opened his palm to reveal a portrait. "Do you recognize this person?" The god frowned slightly as he glanced at the portrait. "It's her." Obviously, they knew each other. Yi Xian said, "Where is she now?" The god glanced at Yi Xian and fell silent. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you want to die?" The god's expression changed slightly, and then he glanced at Mu Sen and Xiwang who stood respectfully behind Yi Xian. He hesitated for a moment before he said, "She's currently trapped in a spacetime cage." Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. "A spacetime cage?" The god gazed at Yi Xian. "You don't know what a spacetime cage is?" Mu Sen looked at Yi Xian with slight surprise as well. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. "Should I know about such a low-level thing?" The god's mouth twitched. "Is it low-level?" Yi Xian waved his hand. "Cut the crap. Take me there." The god glanced at Yi Xian but didn't say anything. Yi Xian turned around to look at Mu Sen and Xiwang. "Chop him up." Xiwang didn't hesitate to transform into a ray of light that slashed down. The god's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He wasn't afraid of Xiwang, but he was very afraid of the sword in Xiwang's hand because that sword could easily tear his body apart. Most importantly, Mu Sen was right there. If the two of them were to join forces, they would be able to kill him with ease. The god hurriedly said, "Wait." In the distance, Yi Xian said, "Stop." Xiwang immediately stopped, and then he retreated respectfully behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian gazed at the god. "Take me there." The wilderness god took a deep glance at Yi Xian, and then he said, "Come with me." With that, he turned around and the space in front of him turned pitch black. The god of the wilderness had entered. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword in Xiwang's hand fell into his hand. He followed them in. Mu Sen and Su Wang hurriedly followed. Soon, the four of them arrived at a mysterious spacetime. This spacetime was like a cage, and it was very, very sturdy. Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw a woman in the distance. It was none other than Sister Shui. At that moment, Sister Shui was locked in a spacetime prison. Not far from her stood two middle-aged men. At this moment, Xiuwang, who was beside Yi Xian, said in a deep voice, "The one on the left is King Martial Spirit, and the one on the right is Zhao Shunxiao." Yi Xian glanced at them, and then he gazed at Sister Shui. At this moment, even though Sister Shui was imprisoned, she was fine. Meanwhile, Yang Nianxue noticed Yi Xian as well. She was slightly stunned when she saw Yi Xian, and then she smiled. "What are you doing here?" All of them gazed at Yi Xian when they heard Yang Nianxue. Yi Xian smiled. "Let's not talk about that for now." As he spoke, he walked slowly towards Yang Nianxue. King Martial Spirit and Zhao Shunxiao frowned when they witnessed this scene. On the other hand, the wilderness god glanced at Yi Xian and remained silent. At this moment, he was quite fearful of Yi Xian. Actually, he was afraid that this fellow might really be at the Destiny Realm. Right when Yi Xian approached the spacetime cage, a wisp of a cold glow flashed in King Martial Spirit's eyes, and he was about to attack. However, Zhao Shunxiao stopped him. Zhao Shunxiao gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Let's wait and see." King Martial Spirit hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose to attack in the end. After all, it was a spatial cage, and it was one that he and Zhao Shunxiao had jointly set up. It was utterly impossible for an ordinary person to break through. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Open." As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped into the spatial cage. King Martial Spirit and Zhao Shunxiao were stunned when they witnessed this scene. He went in just like that? On the other side, the wilderness god had an extremely solemn expression on his face as well. This fellow can actually disregard the spatial cage? Is he really at the Destiny Realm? Yi Xian walked over to Yang Nianxue, and he smiled. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he took Yang Nianxue's hand. In an instant, the mysterious spatial energy around Yang Nianxue vanished. A wisp of surprise flashed through Yang Nianxue's eyes when she witnessed this scene. Just like that, Yi Xian pulled Yang Nianxue out of the spatial cage. On the other side, King Martial Spirit and Zhao Shunxiao had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. King Martial Spirit was about to attack when Zhao Shunxiao stopped him. Meanwhile, Yi Xian turned around to gaze at King Martial Spirit and Zhao Shunxiao. He didn't speak, and he just smiled with disdain. It was like he was looking at two ants. King Martial Spirit's expression instantly turned gloomy when he witnessed this scene, and he suddenly clenched his right hand and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Mu Sun suddenly smiled. "King Martial Spirit, what? You intend to attack a Destiny Realm expert?" Destiny Realm? King Martial Spirit was stunned, and then he gazed at Yi Xian with disbelief in his eyes. "Destiny? Destiny Realm?" Shunxiao's face was covered in disbelief as well. When did a Destiny Realm expert appear in Heaven Horizon? Meanwhile, Yi Xian had left with Yang Nianxue. Mu Sun and Su Wang hurriedly followed them. King Martial Spirit and the others had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Zhao Shunxiao suddenly said, "Is he really a Destiny Realm expert?" As he spoke, he gazed at the Wasteland's god. The Wasteland's god fell silent for a moment before he said, "I don't know." Zhao Shunxiao frowned slightly. "You don't know?" The Wasteland's god spoke in a low voice. "I suspected it as well. However, you've also seen how respectful Mu Sun and that sword cultivator woman are towards him. Not only that, but he can also ignore this spacetime prison. Most importantly, I saw him use an extremely mysterious spacetime. I've never seen that spacetime before." Zhao Shunxiao's expression was quite unsightly when he heard this. King Martial Spirit's expression was extremely gloomy as well. He hadn't expected that a Destiny Realm expert would actually appear here. The cooked duck had flown away. Suddenly, a woman appeared here. It was Shenqin. King Martial Spirit and the others gazed at Shenqin, and she spoke indifferently. "Do all of you really believe that he's at the Destiny Realm?" The Wasteland's god stared at her. "What do you mean?" Shenqin smiled. "What do I mean? Let me tell all of you that fellow isn't at the Destiny realm at all. He's at the Seamless realm. The Wasteland's god spoke coldly. You say that he's only at the Seamless realm. Then let me ask you, why is he able to disregard the spatial cage? Is that space-time cage fake? Shen Qin spoke coldly. The reason he can disregard the spatial cage is because of that sword in his hand. That sword is extremely special, and it can disregard any spatial cage. It's not because of his own strength. The Wasteland's god spoke in a low voice. That sword can disregard any spatial cage? Shen Qin nodded, yes. The Wasteland's god continued, why can it disregard space? Shen Qin spoke indifferently, how would I know? The Wasteland's god smiled, Miss, if what you said is true and he isn't at the Destiny realm, then why is that sword in his hand so terrifying? It can actually disregard any spatial cage? You've already answered that question, so let me ask another one. Where did this sword come from? Shen Qin remained expressionless, how would I know? The Wasteland's god smiled, you don't know? Then let me ask you again, you're also a peak primordial spirit powerhouse, so can you create a divine item that can disregard any spatial cage? Shen Qin was silent. Because she couldn't. The wilderness god shook his head and smiled. Furthermore, he used an extremely mysterious spacetime. I've never seen such a mysterious spacetime before. What I can confirm is that this mysterious spacetime surpasses any spacetime that I know of. Miss, can you tell me where this mysterious spacetime came from? Shen Qin looked at the Wasteland's god, I'm here to tell you that he isn't at the Destiny realm. Why are you talking so much? The Wasteland's god smiled, even if he really isn't at the Destiny realm, he's definitely not an ordinary person. He might even have a Destiny realm powerhouse backing him. Otherwise, he would never be in possession of these divine items. He shook his head and smiled, that Mu Sun isn't a fool either, so why is he so respectful to that young man? No matter what the reason is, one thing is for sure, that young man is not simple. Shen Qin looked at the Wasteland's god, not saying a word. The Wasteland's god continued, Miss, you're telling us all of this because you want us to make a move against him. In other words, you're enemies with that young man, but you don't dare to make a move against him. Since he's only at the seamless path, then why don't you make a move against him? Make a move against him. Shen Qin's expression was quite unsightly. The Wasteland's god glanced at Shen Qin with disdain, do I look like a retard to you? As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Shen Qin fell silent for a moment, and she intended to leave as well. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit spoke abruptly, Miss, is that young man really not at the Destiny realm? Shen Qin glanced at King Martial Spirit, believe it or not. King Martial Spirit chuckled, of course I believe it. Because if that young man really is at the Destiny realm, then he'll absolutely not let us go. Moreover, he hasn't made a move against us. Zhao Shenshao spoke solemnly, just as the Wasteland's god said, that young man isn't an ordinary person. King Martial Spirit spoke ferociously, we've been chasing that woman for an entire month, and we're just about to obtain the mine. Why should we give it up the moment he arrives? As he spoke, his expression grew even more ferocious, so long as he isn't at the Destiny realm, then why should we be afraid of him? Zhao Shenshao was slightly hesitant. King Martial Spirit gazed at Shen Qin, Miss, do you want to join forces? Shen Qin hesitated for a moment and said, all right. King Martial Spirit said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with Shen Qin. Zhao Shenshao hesitated for a moment, but he didn't choose to join forces because he trusted the Wasteland's god's words more. Yi Xian's group had just returned to Skypole City when King Martial Spirit and Shen Qin appeared before them. Yi Xian frowned when he saw this. King Martial Spirit gazed at Mu Sun, he isn't a Destiny realm expert at all. The reason he's able to disregard space is entirely because of that sword in his hand. Without that sword, he's nothing. Mu Sun frowned when he heard this, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. It was this young lady who told you that, right? Shen Qin gazed at Yi Xian. Are you still going to continue acting? Yi Xian smiled, and then he opened his palm, causing the green profound sword to fly over to King Martial Spirit. Didn't she say that this sword is formidable? Come, use it. King Martial Spirit's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he glanced at Shen Qin. Shen Qin remained silent because she felt that something was off. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit suddenly grasped the sword and slashed down. Hiss! A ray of light slashed down, and space was torn apart. However, this was King Martial Spirit's own strength. King Martial Spirit was stunned. He was unwilling to give up, and he studied the green profound sword once more. However, he didn't notice anything special about it. It was a completely useless sword. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was far away, suddenly walked towards King Martial Spirit slowly. He said with a smile, "The sword is extraordinary because of the person. In the hands of some people, this sword is a very ordinary sword. But in my hands, it is the most invincible sword in the world." As he spoke, he gazed at King Martial Spirit and smiled. The sword isn't important. What's important is the person who uses it. A sword is extraordinary because of the person, understand? Everyone was speechless. Chapter 1930. Fear arose in King Wu Ling's eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian who was walking over. Meanwhile, Shen Qin suddenly laughed coldly. "Yi Xian, you're still putting on an act. If you're really at the Fate Knower realm, then kill us." Yi Xian gazed at Shen Qin and smiled. "Kill you? Are you even worthy?" Shen Qin's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. "What are you putting on an act for?" Right at this moment, Yang Nianxue suddenly vanished on the spot. Shen Qin's expression instantly changed drastically, and she swiftly raised her arm to block it. Bang! Along with a deafening explosion, Shen Qin was blasted 30 kilometers away. As soon as she stopped moving, the expanse of space behind her was obliterated. Yi Xian was shocked at the sight of that. That Sister Shui was awesome. Yang Nianxue glanced at Shen Qin who'd been blasted away and smiled. "Do you know who he is?" As she spoke, she turned around to gaze at Yi Xian, and then the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. "He's my master. He attained the Fate Knower realm 1,000,000 years ago." Master! Everyone here was stunned when they heard Yang Nianxue. Yi Xian was the same, but he quickly returned to normal. Obviously, Big Sister Shui was playing along with his act. Big Sister Shui knows what to do. Shen Qin stared fixedly at Yang Nianxue. "It's impossible for you to be his disciple. He's just a cultivator of the seamless Tao." Yang Nianxue shook her head. "You really are an idiot." As she spoke, she turned around to gaze at King Wu Ling. King Wu Ling's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly said, "Sorry for the disturbance." As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly let go of the green profound sword, and it floated slowly over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian held the green profound sword in his hand and swung it lightly. In an instant, the space in the surroundings started to warp. King Wu Ling's eyelids twitched slightly when he witnessed this scene. Yi Xian glanced at King Wu Ling and smiled. "I'm taking the Sky Palace crystal mine. If you're disgruntled, then feel free to call for revenge. No matter how many. I'm invincible, so do as you please." Everyone was speechless. King Wu Ling glanced at Yi Xian and hurriedly said, "I wouldn't dare. This junior will take his leave." With that, he turned around and disappeared. Yi Xian glanced at Shen Qin in the distance and smiled. "Lady Shen Qin, on account of our past relationship, I won't kill you today. You may leave. However, don't pester me anymore. I'm wholeheartedly pursuing the Tao, and I don't want to be tied down by relationships." Mu Sun and Su Wang's expressions became strange when they heard this. No wonder. So there was something going on between the two of them. Shen Qin's expression became extremely unsightly. Yi Xian, what nonsense are you spouting? When have I ever had any feelings for you? Yi Xian smiled and said, let's go. With that, he turned around and left. The divine quilt said angrily, speak clearly. She was about to chase after Yi Xian when Yang Nianxue suddenly blocked her way. Yang Nianxue looked at the divine quilt and said with a smile, let's go back. With that, she turned around and left. Shen Qin's expression was extremely unsightly. Meanwhile, Xiong Ho appeared by her side. She glanced at her and smiled, I told you not to expose him because it was useless. But you refused to believe me. Now you've suffered a loss, right? Shen Qin remained expressionless. All of you are a bunch of idiots. Xiong Ho shook her head, if you aren't an idiot, then why didn't you do anything to him? Shen Qin glanced at Xiong Ho, what are you trying to say? Xiong Ho smiled, I'm trying to say that you're an idiot. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Shen Qin spoke coldly, Xiong Ho, let me see how you'll obtain that mysterious space from him. Xiong Ho licked her candied paws and didn't even look back. You don't have to worry about that. Shen Qin's expression grew more and more unsightly. As soon as he found out that Yi Xian had returned to the city, the old man Profundity had immediately come out to greet Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't leave just like that. He asked the old man Profundity to arrange a place for him to stay. Within a pavilion. Only Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue were within a room. Yi Xian smiled, long time no see, big sister Xue. Yang Nianxue sized Yi Xian up and smiled, I never expected that you would come to save me. As she spoke, she sized up Yi Xian again, are you really just a cultivator of the seamless path? Yi Xian nodded. Yang Nianxue gave him a thumbs up, amazing. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, big sister Xue, what do you plan to do after this? Yang Nianxue glanced at the surroundings and said, I want to take you somewhere. Yi Xian asked, where? Yang Nianxue smiled, an ancient ruin. I obtained this heaven pole crystal ore from that ancient ruin. However, I didn't go deep into it, and I was just at the outer area. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, big sister Xue, why didn't father bring you along with him? Yang Nianxue immediately shook her head, following father is truly too boring. Yi Xian smiled bitterly, it's really dangerous outside. Yang Nianxue smiled, it's good to be dangerous. Danger can temper oneself. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, that's true. Yang Nianxue glanced outside and said, let's set out in a while. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, should we bring Mu Sun and the others with us? Yang Nianxue smiled, why? Yi Xian said, I think that we can be of use. Moreover, it's a chaotic place, so it's good to have 2 more helpers. Yang Nianxue spoke in a low voice, aren't you afraid that they'll see through you? Yi Xian smiled, what's there to be afraid of? Don't I still have you, big sister Xue? Yang Nianxue asked, are you afraid that woman and the martial spirit king will spoil our plans again? Yi Xian nodded, I haven't done anything, so they'll get suspicious in the end. Moreover, you have a mine in your possession, so they won't give up on it. Yang Nianxue nodded, then I'll take it with me. As soon as she finished speaking, both of them left the pavilion. On the other hand, Mu Sun, Old Man Profound, and Xuwang were waiting outside. Old Man Profound hurriedly said when he saw Yi Xian, Senior, are you uncomfortable? Yi Xian smiled, it's very comfortable. As he spoke, he glanced at the 3 of them and said, my disciple said that she discovered an ancient ruin, and her mine was discovered there. Are the 3 of you interested in going with her? The 3 of them were overjoyed when they heard this. Old Man Profound hurriedly said, of course I'm interested. But, is it convenient for us to go with her? Yi Xian said with a smile, why not? Old Man Profound immediately bowed slightly, thank you, Senior. Mu Sun bowed deeply as well, thank you. Yi Xian gazed at Xiuwang, you come with us as well. I'll guide you in the meantime so that you can attain the nascent soul realm. Xiuwang was excited when he heard this, and he immediately bowed respectfully, thank you, senior. Yi Xian smiled. Xiuwang's combat strength was extremely formidable, so if he attained the nascent soul realm and possessed the green profound sword, then he would absolutely be invincible in the nascent soul realm. A short moment later, they set out. Old Man Profound spoke solemnly on the way, Senior, 2 women have been constantly following us from the shadows. Should we? Yi Xian turned around to glance at them. He naturally knew who Old Man Profound was talking about. It was naturally Xiong Ho and Shen Qin. They were very patient and had followed them all the way here. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, I know them. Let them follow us. When she spoke up to hear, she sighed softly, I can only blame myself for being too playful all those years ago. Hearing this, Old Man Profound Ji was taken aback, and then he laughed awkwardly. Shen Qin gazed at Yi Xian and the others in the distance, where are they going? Xiong Ho spoke indifferently, who knows? Shen Qin glanced at Xiong Ho and said, the members of the Tendo sect have arrived. Xiong Ho shook her head, what's the point? Not to mention them, even if the sect master of the Tendo sect were to be reborn, what's the point? Didn't you see? That fellow has 4 extraordinary bodyguards by his side right now. 4 extraordinary bodyguards. Shen Qin's expression was slightly unsightly when she heard this. Xiong Ho shook her head and sighed, damn it. Let me see how long this fellow can keep up his act. Shen Qin looked towards the distance with an expressionless face, if he encounters a true fate knower. At this point, she didn't continue speaking. A true fate knower expert? Even she hadn't seen one. Such an expert was truly too rare. In the distance, under Yang Nianxue's lead, everyone headed straight for the ancient ruins. On the way, Yi Xian gazed at Xiuwang, enter Xiao Ta's body and cultivate. Xiuwang was stunned, and then his voice trembled, can I? Yi Xian nodded, of course. As he spoke, he gazed at Yang Nianxue, heaven limit crystals. Yang Nianxue smiled, and then she tapped with her finger, causing a spatial ring to descend before Xiuwang. Xiuwang glanced at the spatial ring, and there were an entire 50,000 heaven limit crystals within it. Xiuwang's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene, After all, she relied on robbing others to obtain heaven limit crystals every single time, and she'd obtained 1,000 heaven limit crystals at most every year. Moreover, she'd exchanged her life for them. Yet now, Xiuwang had given her 50,000 heaven limit crystals. Yang Nianxue smiled, 50,000 heaven limit crystals should be sufficient for you to attain the soul origin realm. If it's not enough, then I'll give you more. Xiuwang bowed deeply, thank you. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, Miss Xiuwang, we can be considered to be fated. How about this? If you're willing, then take me as your master. Not only will I help you attain the soul origin realm, I'll even teach you a peerless and extraordinary sword technique. Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity were visibly moved when they heard this. Both of them glanced at Xiuwang with a trace of envy in their eyes. Take her as his master. That's equivalent to finding an extraordinary backer. Xiuwang didn't hesitate at all, and he immediately bowed deeply, greetings, master. Yi Xian roared with laughter, there's no need for such formalities. Enter the tower and cultivate. If there's anything you don't understand, then feel free to ask me. Xiuwang nodded, all right. As soon as she finished speaking, she entered Xiao Ta's body. Inside Xiao Ta, Xiuwang gazed at the spatial ring in her hand, and she took a deep breath. As long as she had enough heaven limit crystals, she was confident that she could attain the soul origin realm. This was how the world was. No matter how hard you worked or how talented you were, if you didn't have money, then it was all nonsense. Most of the time, if someone helped you up, then your life would be completely different. After a while, Xiuwang slowly closed her eyes and began to cultivate. Chapter 1931. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's group arrived at the depths of a mountain range. Mu Sun glanced at the surroundings and said, "Miss Shui, this is the ancient ruin?" Yang Nianxue nodded. Mu Sun spoke in a low voice, "But there's nothing here." Yang Nianxue smiled, "There's a secret here." As she spoke, she walked over to a nearby tree, and then she pressed down lightly with her right hand. A strand of mysterious energy seeped into the tree, and then the mountain that was over 1 kilometer away actually started to become illusory. Not long after, under everyone's watchful eyes, the mountain slowly split open, and an ancient black palace appeared within the mountain. Mu Sun and the others were visibly moved when they witnessed this scene. A ruin. Both of them were about to head over when they seemed to have thought of something, and they stopped and turned around to look at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yang Nianxue smiled and said, "This place isn't simple at all. For example, there's a spatial formation not too far away from us. Outsiders will instantly lose their sense of direction upon entering it, and then they'll fall into a boundless spatial abyss. Even a soul core realm expert can't disregard the spatial abyss there." Mu Sun spoke in a low voice, "Thank you for the warning, Miss Shui." Yi Xian smiled, "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. Mu Sun and the old man hurriedly followed him. When Yi Xian's group stepped foot into that expanse of space had instantly crisscrossed. The expressions of Mu Sun and the others changed slightly when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a mysterious spacetime suddenly appeared around Yi Xian, and as soon as this mysterious spacetime appeared, the spacetime formations in the surroundings started to disperse bit by bit. They weren't able to endure Yi Xian's mysterious space at all. Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity exchanged glances when they witnessed this scene, and there was a wisp of shock in their eyes. He really is a big shot. Actually, Yang Nianxue was quite shocked as well. In the beginning, she'd thought that Yi Xian was putting on a show, but she'd recently noticed that Yi Xian was actually quite formidable. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at them and smiled, "Let's go." All of them continued forward. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, there was a middle-aged man standing on the stone steps. The middle-aged man was wearing a very simple gray robe and a bamboo hat. His eyes were slightly closed, and he did not seem to be alive. Yi Xian glanced at the middle-aged man, and at this moment, the middle-aged man slowly opened his eyes. Mu Sun and the old man's expressions changed slightly when they saw this scene, and they secretly raised their guard in their hearts. Because the two of them couldn't see through this middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's gaze landed on Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian was silent. For a time, the surroundings fell silent. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. The middle-aged man still didn't say anything. He just looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly released a mysterious spacetime that enveloped the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was slightly stunned and a trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes. "This?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "How should I address you?" The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian, "You're not simple at all." Yi Xian grinned. "Can we go up?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "No." Yi Xian smiled. "Why?" The middle-aged man said, "All of you aren't fated people." Fated people. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. What are fated people? The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian. "If I'm fated, then Master will give me information." But Master didn't give me any information. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the palace above the stone steps, and then he opened his palm. The green sword floated slowly towards the black palace. The middle-aged man frowned when he saw this, but he didn't stop Chen Shi. A short moment later, a hoarse voice suddenly resounded from within the palace. "Fellow Taoist, please come up here." Mu Sen and the old man exchanged glances when they heard the voice from within the palace, and they were extremely shocked in their hearts. Obviously, the master of the palace was a Destiny Realm expert, and he'd acknowledged Yi Xian. This was normal. After all, they were both at the Destiny Realm. Yi Xian gazed at the middle-aged man, and the middle-aged man bowed slightly. Please. Yi Xian turned around to look at Yang Nianxue. Yang Nianxue smiled and said, "Go ahead." Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked towards the palace. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive within the palace. The palace was completely empty, and there was only a single statue there. Moreover, the green sword hovered silently in front of the statue. Yi Xian gazed at the statue, and then it suddenly became illusory. After that, a white-haired old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The white-haired old man wore a white robe, and his hair and beard were completely white. He seemed extremely sage-like. The white-haired old man gazed at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "You've surprised me slightly." Yi Xian smiled, "What surprise?" The white-haired old man glanced at the green sword, and then he smiled, "This isn't an ordinary sword. However, it's absolutely not yours. Moreover, you aren't a Destiny Realm expert, you've attained the Seamless Tao." Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, he was sure that the white-haired old man really was at the Destiny Realm. Moreover, he was utterly unable to deceive an expert of such a level. Fortunately, he'd sealed off Xiao Ta, so Su Wang couldn't hear the conversation between him and the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man spoke abruptly, "You revealed a mysterious form of space when you entered just now. Can you let me take a look at it again?" Yi Xian glanced at the white-haired old man. He fell silent for a moment before he took a step forward, and then the mysterious space appeared here. The white-haired old man glanced at the surroundings, and then a wisp of excitement flickered in his eyes. What a formidable space. I've actually never seen it before. Not only have I never seen it, I've never even heard of it. Yi Xian didn't say anything. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man gazed at the green sword. "Moreover, this sword of yours is truly extraordinary. The profundities of space and time contained within it are truly profound." Yi Xian smiled, "Senior, don't tell me you have other intentions?" The white-haired old man blinked. "I left this strand of my soul here with the intention of finding an inheritor. However, I never expected that I wouldn't be able to find an inheritor and would encounter you instead." Yi Xian smiled, "I can be Senior's inheritor." The white-haired old man smiled, "Just as well. However, what gift do you intend to give me?" Yi Xian smiled, "Senior, don't tell me you want my sword and that mysterious space?" The white-haired old man gazed at Yi Xian, "What if I say yes?" Yi Xian smiled, "Senior, you're only a strand of your soul." The white-haired old man roared with laughter, "I knew you'd say that. Look outside." Yi Xian turned around and looked outside the hall. A mysterious force suddenly swept down from the clouds above the hall, and then the entire space and time in the surroundings started to seethe along with the assault of this force. At the foot of the mountain, Mu Sen and Old Man Profundity were horrified. The powerful aura pressed down upon them to the point they found it difficult to breathe. The Life Knower Realm. A white-robed old man slowly walked down from above the clouds. At the sight of that, Yi Xian's face fell in the hall. Damn it! For the sake of obtaining the green sword and the mysterious space within my body, this fellow actually came in person. Isn't he thinking too highly of me? The white-robed old man glanced at Mu Sen's group of three. In the next moment, a mysterious force directly locked down Mu Sen's group of three. Bang! 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 Their bodies shook violently, and they weren't able to move at all. Yang Nianxue's brows knit together slightly, and then a strand of light silently condensed into form at the center of her palm. However, she didn't attack. The white-robed old man walked slowly into the hall, and then he gazed at Yi Xian and smiled, "The mysterious space within your body and the sword in your hand are mine. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then you have to ask the person behind me if he agrees. The white-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The person behind you? Yi Xian smiled, Senior, if the person behind me agrees, then I'll give these 2 divine artifacts to you right away. The white-robed old man smiled, are you threatening me? Yi Xian shook his head, I wouldn't dare. Could it be that Senior doesn't want to see the person behind me first before deciding if he wants these 2 divine artifacts? The white-robed old man roared with laughter, all right, then let me see who the great figure behind you is. Yi Xian nodded, and then he passed the green profound sword to the white-robed old man, Senior, you can use this sword to find the person behind me. The white-robed old man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he took the green profound sword and said, the old man has traversed countless universes, and there have been people that the old man fears. However, there are no more than 2 of them. As he spoke, he gazed at the green profound sword in his hand, and then he smiled, let me see who the person behind you is. Yi Xian smiled but didn't say anything. The white-robed old man suddenly tightened his grip on the green profound sword, and it trembled violently. The space before him gradually warped, and at the same time, it gradually became illusory. Yi Xian gazed at the white-robed old man. He didn't speak. Right at this moment, the white-robed old man suddenly smiled, I hope the person behind you doesn't disappoint the old man. Yi Xian grinned, Senior, I have a question. The white-robed old man roared with laughter, you can ask it later. Yi Xian shook his head, it's better to ask it now. I'm afraid I won't be able to ask it later. The white-robed old man frowned slightly, what do you mean? Yi Xian didn't answer him, and he asked instead, Senior, have you seen an expert above the predestined realm? The white-robed old man was stunned, and then he smiled, are you trying to say that the person behind you is an expert above the predestined realm? Yi Xian smiled and didn't speak. The white-robed old man shook his head and smiled, how laughable. There's no such thing as a realm above the predestined realm in this world because no one has created it until now. You're actually trying to deceive me? How foolish. Yi Xian grinned and didn't speak. Right at this moment, the white-robed old man suddenly raised his head and looked into the sky, and his eyes narrowed slightly, I sense it. Hiss. A strand of sword light suddenly entered between the white-robed old man's brows. Bang! The white-robed old man's figure shook violently, and the vitality within his body was directly eliminated. The white-robed old man's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Killed in a second? I was killed in a second? At this moment, his mind was in a complete mess. He was an expert at the peak of the predestined realm, but he was killed in a second. And he didn't even know who killed him in a second. The white-robed old man looked at Yi Xian, and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly wielded his sword, and the white-robed old man's head was directly cut off. At the same time, the white-robed old man's storage ring was taken by Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't look at the storage ring. Instead, he carried the white-robed old man's head and walked out. When Mu Sun and the other 2 saw the white-robed old man's head, they directly froze on the spot. The middle-aged man was also dumbfounded. His master was dead? Yi Xian smiled lightly, we didn't have a good talk, so I killed him. Unfortunately, he was too weak, and couldn't even take a sword from me. As he spoke, he sighed softly, are all the predestined realm experts in this era so weak? I only used 30% of my strength in that sword just now. Everyone. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1932. At this moment, all of them were stunned. A life-knower realm expert had been killed. Moreover, he'd been killed with such ease. What did this mean? It meant that the gap in their strengths was too huge. Yi Xian walked over to the others with the old man's head in his hand, and then he gazed at the middle-aged man who stood on guard below the stairs. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with terror. He knew how terrifying his master was, and it was even his master's true body this time. However, he hadn't expected that his true body would be instantly killed as well. How terrifying is this fellow's strength? He killed a life-knower realm expert in an instant. Yi Xian gazed at the middle-aged man and smiled. "What's your name?" The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before his voice trembled. "Mu Jianghe." Yi Xian smiled. "Follow me from now on." The middle-aged man was stunned, and then he hurriedly bowed respectfully. "From now on, I, Mu Jianghe, pledge my loyalty to Senior, and I'm willing to serve you faithfully." Yi Xian smiled, and then he passed the head to Mu Jianghe. "Bury him. We were once master and servant after all." Mu Jianghe was slightly hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not testing you. There's no need for me to do this, right?" Mu Jianghe was relieved when he heard this. He took the head, and his hands trembled as he gazed at it. On the other hand, Mu Sen and Old Man Profundity couldn't help but bow. Since he was able to instantly kill a life-knower realm expert, it meant that this senior wasn't an ordinary life-knower realm expert. He's too strong. I must hug him properly. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and then he smiled. This is a small abode. At this moment, Mu Jianghe, who had returned, hurriedly said, "This place used to be the territory of the mysterious East sect. Later, my master, the former master, took a fancy to it, so he destroyed the mysterious East sect and took it for himself." Yi Xian smiled. "There are heaven-rank crystals here?" Mu Jianghe nodded. "Moreover, there are 3 top-grade heaven-rank crystals here." 3. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Yang Nianxue. The corners of Yang Nianxue's mouth lifted. "I'll do it." As she said that, she pressed her right hand down lightly. In an instant, the entire ground trembled violently. Gradually, the ground split open and 3 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals appeared before everyone's eyes. Every single crystal mine contained close to 100,000 top-grade heaven supreme crystals. The eyes of Mu Sen and Old Man Profound Secrets turned red when they saw this scene. That was over 100,000 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals. Moreover, it was of the highest quality. One had to know that 1 supreme-grade heaven-grade crystal was equivalent to 5 ordinary heaven-grade crystals. Although their eyes were red, Mu Sen and Old Man Profound Secrets were still very calm. Meanwhile, Mu Jianghe hesitated for a moment before he said, "Senior, if you take them away, then they'll be useless." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Mu Jianghe smiled bitterly. "Because these 3 crystal mines can only survive here. If they leave this place, their spiritual qi will leak out. Without the nourishment of the power of the earth vein, they won't be able to condense the supreme heaven crystal anymore. That's why their previous master didn't take them with him all those years ago." Yi Xian glanced down. Sure enough, it was just as Mu Jianghe said, there was extremely pure energy of the earth vein beneath the ground. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian grinned. "I have a better place than this." As he spoke, he immediately placed the 3 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals into Xiao Ta's storage ring. After he placed the 3 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals into Xiao Ta, Yi Xian suddenly thought of something, and it was that the flow of time within the pagoda was different from the outside world. For example, it took 10 years to condense a single supreme-grade heaven supreme crystal in the outside world. But if the heaven supreme crystal mine was within Xiao Ta's storage ring, then it meant that he would be able to obtain one in a single day. What a huge profit! As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian looked at Mu Sen and Old Man Profound Ji and smiled. "My disciple and I will each take a heaven supreme crystal mine. I won't give you the remaining one, but I can give you the 120,000 supreme-grade heaven supreme crystals in it. What do you think?" Hearing this, the 2 of them instantly became excited. Mu Sen's voice trembled. "Senior, the 2 of us didn't do anything. This." Yi Xian smiled. "Since you're following me, then you should at least get some soup when I have meat to eat. Otherwise, what's the point of you following me? As he spoke, he pointed with his finger, and 2 spatial rings floated in front of the 2 of them. Mu Sun and Old Man Profound Ji hesitated. Yi Xian smiled, I'll give it to you. Just take it. Old Man Profound Ji smiled bitterly, Senior, the 2 of us didn't do anything to help you. This is too much for us to accept. Yi Xian smiled, that's enough. Just take it. Hearing this, the 2 of them no longer hesitated, and immediately accepted the 2 spatial rings. After Old Man Profound Ji accepted the spatial rings, he bowed deeply to Yi Xian. I, Profound Ji, will never forget Senior's kindness. In the future, if Senior needs anything, just let me know. I, Profound Ji, will definitely not refuse. Mu Sun also bowed deeply, Senior, my life is yours from now on. Yi Xian smiled, let's cut the formalities. I still need to stay in the heavenly limit realm for some time. During this time, I might need you to help me with something. Mu Sun hurriedly said, I'm willing to serve Senior. Old Man Profound Ji also hurriedly said, I'm willing to serve Senior. Yi Xian smiled, let's go. After saying this, he led the group out of the ancient ruins. After returning to the heavenly limit city, Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue returned to the room that Old Man Profound Ji had arranged for them. Yi Xian smiled, Sister, we've struck it big this time. As he spoke, he took out the spatial ring of the life-knowing state expert. There were over 1 million top-grade sky crystals in the spatial ring. Moreover, there were some divine objects in the spatial ring, and it was obvious that they were priceless. Yang Nianxue rummaged through the spatial ring, and in the end, she took out a blood-red flag. This thing isn't simple. Yi Xian looked at the flag, and there were 3 large blood-red words written on it, Soul Summoning Banner. Yi Xian smiled, Sister Shui, you can choose whatever you want. Yang Nianxue smiled, let me study this. As she spoke, she put the Soul Summoning Banner away, and then she took out a black ring. She sized up the ring and smiled, so it's a guardian ring. Yi Xian was slightly curious, guardian ring? Yang Nianxue nodded, this spatial ring is quite interesting. It contains 9 mysterious guardian spacetime, and once activated, the 9 guardian spacetime can combine into one, and it's more than enough to block a life-knowing state expert's all-out attack. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. That old man didn't use this ring until he died. Was she the one who made the move? Yi Xian nodded. Yang Nianxue shook her head with a complicated expression, no wonder that old man didn't even have a chance to fight back. Destiny. If that woman made a move, even 10 life-knowing state experts would be instantly killed. Yang Nianxue handed the spatial ring to Yi Xian, you keep it. However, Yi Xian shook his head, you keep it. Yang Nianxue smiled, I don't need this thing, but you can. Just as Yi Xian was about to say something, Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian, I said it's for you, so it's for you. Cut the crap. Saying this, she put the spatial ring away, the guardian ring is for you, and everything else in the spatial ring is for me. Hearing this, Yi Xian was dumbfounded, and the gratitude he felt just now vanished without a trace. This big sister must be a bandit. There are 1 million supreme-grade heavenly G crystals in there. Seeing Yi Xian's dumbfounded expression, Yang Nianxue blinked, you can't bear to part with it? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, of course I can bear to give it to you, big sister, but, suddenly, Yang Nianxue slapped Yi Xian's shoulder, good little brother. Yi Xian, Yang Nianxue continued, I want to break through to life-knowing state. Yi Xian was surprised, break through to life-knowing state? Yang Nianxue nodded, I need a lot of heavenly G crystals. Even 1 million might not be enough. Yi Xian said in a low voice, is it that terrifying? Yang Nianxue rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, what else can I do? You should know that there are pitifully few life-knowing state cultivators in this universe. Why are there so few? Because breaking through to life-knowing state from primordial spirit state requires a lot of supreme-grade heavenly G crystals. This consumption is not something ordinary people can afford. Many people can't reach life-knowing state, not because they are not talented enough, not because they don't work hard enough, but because they don't have money, understand? No money. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Indeed, cultivation requires a lot of money. Yang Nianxue said again, I don't know if this 1 million supreme-grade heavenly G crystals is enough, but I feel that it might not be enough, so, she looked at Yi Xian, and the corners of her mouth curled up, brother, you have to think of a way to get more for me. She looked at Yi Xian, and the corners of her mouth curled up, big brother, you have to think of a way to get more for me. Yang Nianxue pointed at the storage ring on her hand. This life-knowing state cultivator's storage ring has many divine items, and we can auction them. We should be able to get some, but it might not be enough. In any case, you do as you see fit, I'm going to cultivate. When I reach life-knowing state, I'll protect you. With that, she entered Xiao Ta. In the room, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. This big sister is too unreliable. Find her some heavenly G crystals. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice and then left the room. He looked around. Xuanji. Old man profound secrets appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he bowed deeply. What can I do for you, senior? Yi Xian said with a smile, is there any auction here? Old man profound secrets smiled, of course there is. What do you want to buy, senior? Yi Xian shook his head, I want to sell some miscellaneous items that I don't need. Old man profound secrets hurriedly said, I'll arrange it. Yi Xian smiled, then I'll trouble you. Old man profound secrets hurriedly shook his head, it's no trouble. Senior, please wait a moment, I'll inform you after I arrange it. Yi Xian nodded, all right. Old man profound secrets turned and left. At this time, Yi Xian turned to the side, Miss Xiong Ho, come out. Not far away, Xiong Ho slowly walked out from the corner of the street. Yi Xian looked at Xiong Ho, and smiled, you've been with me for a long time. Xiong Ho said solemnly, let's cooperate. Yi Xian blinked, cooperate? Xiong Ho nodded. Yi Xian's lips curled up, Miss Xiong Ho, I gave you a chance once, but you didn't care. Now you want to cooperate? Sorry, I don't want to. With that, he turned and left. At this time, Xiong Ho suddenly smiled, I have a secret, you'll definitely be interested. Yi Xian didn't stop. Xiong Ho said, someone is planning to kill you. Kill me? Yi Xian smiled disdainfully, under 3 swords, I'm invincible. Above 3 swords, I'll trade 1 for 1. Chapter 1933. Arrogant. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xiong Ho knew that this fellow was completely arrogant now. However, he had the capital to be arrogant now. This fellow had several peak essence soul realm experts by his side. Even she did not dare to approach him. Xiong Ho was silent for a moment before sighing softly. She had lost her best opportunity. Originally, she could have worked with Yi Xian, and working with Yi Xian would have been extremely beneficial to her. However, she had been too greedy at that time. That greed had caused her to lose her best opportunity. Moments later, Xiong Ho turned and left. After Yi Xian returned to his room, he slowly closed his eyes. Xiong Ho had said that someone wanted to kill him. Who could it be? The first person he thought of was Shen Qin. However, with Shen Qin's strength, it was impossible for him to come looking for trouble alone. In other words, there was someone else. King Martial Spirit? God of the Wilderness? Yi Xian fell into deep thought. Anything was possible. At that moment, Su Wang suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback, then overjoyed. Essence Soul Realm? Su Wang bowed deeply. Master, I have reached the Essence Soul Realm. Essence Soul Realm. Yi Xian smiled. Not bad at all. With that said, he brought Su Wang into Xiao Ta. Inside Xiao Ta, Yi Xian looked at Su Wang. Now, I will teach you a sword technique that I created. This sword technique is called Life-Death Draw. This sword technique is too powerful, so I will just casually show it to you so that it doesn't destroy this universe. With that said, he drew his sword and slashed. Chi! A beam of sword light slashed down, and the entire spacetime turned illusory. Su Wang was shocked. This is stacking? Yi Xian nodded. I just stacked 6,000 of them. Come, try it. Su Wang hurriedly nodded. All right. Under Yi Xian's guidance, Xu Wang began to practice draw the sword to determine life and death. Needless to say, Su Wang's natural talent in the sword Dao was truly terrifying. It didn't take him long to learn the sword draw of life and death. Moreover, he was able to stack a few thousand sword strikes as soon as he learned it. This made Yi Xian blush with shame. After a long time, Xu Wang stopped. She looked at Yi Xian and said excitedly, Master, I can now stack 5,000 sword draws to determine life and death. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Don't be satisfied. You should know that if I use my full strength, I can overlay 100,000 Daos with a single thought. 100,000. Xu Wang's eyes widened in disbelief. You can stack up to 100,000? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Su Wang's expression gradually turned solemn. How terrifying would it be if 100,000 swords were drawn to determine life and death? Yi Xian smiled and said, Take your time. Xu Wang nodded. Understood. Yi Xian passed a spatial ring to Su Wang. Cultivating this sword skill will consume a lot of energy. There are 50,000 supreme-grade heavenly crystals in this spatial ring. It should be enough for you to cultivate for a while. Let me know if you have any questions or needs. He left Xiao Ta as soon as he finished speaking. Su Wang gazed at the spatial ring in his hand and fell silent for a long time. No one had ever been so nice to her. A short while later, Su Wang put the spatial ring away and started to cultivate. Outside Xiao Ta, Yi Xian was slightly excited. Su Wang had reached the primordial spirit realm. If she used sword draws to determine life and death with the green profound sword, she would definitely be invincible in the primordial spirit realm. Moreover, she might even be able to fight a life-knowing realm cultivator. After all, that was the green profound sword. It was definitely an existence that could challenge those of a higher realm. Besides that, Sister Xue might be able to attain the life-knowing realm as well. If Sister Xue could attain the life-knowing realm, it would naturally be extremely beneficial to him. However, the consumption of energy for Sister Xue to attain the life-knowing realm was truly too great. Up until now, Sister Xue had already consumed over 100,000 supreme-grade extreme heaven crystals. At this rate, 1,000,000 crystals would probably be far from enough. He had to think of a way to obtain more extreme heaven crystals. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked outside the door. Come in. The door opened and old man Xuanji walked in. He bowed slightly and said, Senior, the auction is about to begin. Yi Xian smiled. So soon? Old man Xuanji smiled. I dare not delay Senior's arrangements. Yi Xian laughed. Then let's go. He and old man Xuanji disappeared from the room. Heaven's Fate City, Xuanji Pavilion. The Xuanji Pavilion was old man Xuanji's territory. This time, the auction would be held in old man Xuanji's Xuanji Pavilion. Old man Xuanji had stayed in Heaven's Fate City for over 1,000,000 years. His influence was extremely great. Under his arrangements, basically all the influential people in Heaven's Fate City had come. Of course, the main reason was still Yi Xian. This was because old man Xuanji had advertised that a life-knowing state expert would be auctioning divine items. A life-knowing state expert. How could the items of a life-knowing state expert be ordinary? In a short while, the entire Xuanji pavilion was filled with over 100 experts. There weren't many people, but the weakest was at the primordial spirit realm. In old man Xuanji's words, those below the primordial spirit realm were all paupers. There was no point in participating in the auction. Old man Xuanji brought Yi Xian to a small pavilion. This small pavilion just happened to have a view of the entire auction venue below. Old man Xuanji bowed slightly. May I know what divine items Senior is auctioning? Yi Xian handed the storage ring in his hand to old man Xuanji. It's all inside. Old man Xuanji glanced at it and his expression changed drastically. He looked at Yi Xian. Senior, are you selling all these divine items? Yi Xian nodded. The divine items left behind by the life-knowing state expert were all very good. However, to him, apart from the guardian ring, the rest were basically useless. Because he had the Azure Profound Sword and Xiao Ta, he really didn't care about the other divine items. Old man Xuanji smiled bitterly. Senior, if these divine items are released, they will definitely shock them. Yi Xian laughed. As long as they can be sold for a good price. Old man Xuanji smiled. That's for sure. Senior, please take a seat. I'll go make the arrangements. He turned and left after saying this. Yi Xian looked around and then sat down. He closed his eyes slightly. At this moment, he was thinking. If his enemies wanted to touch him, how would they do it? The answer was that they would definitely wait until he was alone before making a move. At this point, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He hurriedly looked around. There was nothing around him. Yi Xian tried hard to calm himself down. A moment later, a smile appeared on his face. Since you're already here, come on out. No response. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Is there really no one here? A moment later, Yi Xian leaned back on the chair and said, Since you're already here, come on out. Still no response. Yi Xian would say this every quarter of an hour. He had nothing better to do anyway. The auction had begun. The first divine item had caused the experts in the auction hall to be excited. The first divine item was a spear that contained many special spacetime abilities. The starting price was 10,000 heavenly crystal. In just a short while, the price had increased to 30,000 heavenly crystal. It might seem like a small amount, but it was actually a lot. Because the heavenly crystal was too precious in this place. In the pavilion, Yi Xian would say this every 15 minutes. Since you're already here, come on out. Just like that, time trickled by. Around 2 hours later, Yi Xian had earned 200,000 heavenly crystal. When one of the divine items was sold, Yi Xian said again, Since you're already here, come on out. As soon as he finished speaking, a shadow suddenly appeared behind him. Sensing the shadow behind him, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. Damn it! There's really someone here. The shadow said in a hoarse voice, How did you find me? Yi Xian's expression was calm. Get lost. The shadow hesitated for a moment before it vanished silently. Sensing the shadow's disappearance, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Damn it! Someone really wants to kill me. Who could it be? Shenqin. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's expression turned gloomy. Damn it! This damned woman. Outside the auction house, somewhere in the clouds, a woman looked down at the auction in silence. That woman was the Shenqin. Moreover, there was a middle-aged man by the woman's side, and it was the martial spirit king. The reason the martial spirit king had come to target Yi Xian again was because he'd investigated Yi Xian's origins, and he'd personally investigated Yi Xian. Yi Xian wasn't at the Destiny realm at all. This fellow was just putting on an act. Shenqin suddenly said, "Will that fellow succeed?" The martial spirit king smiled, "Don't worry, Brother Dark Addiction's concealment technique is peerless in the world. Besides true Destiny realm experts, even I wouldn't be able to notice him. On the other hand, Yi Xian is merely a cultivator of the seamless path. It's utterly impossible for him to notice Brother Dark Addiction." Shenqin spoke in a low voice, "Don't underestimate that fellow. Even though his cultivation is low, he has quite a few divine items in his possession. We can't be careless." The martial spirit king was just about to speak when a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. The martial spirit king was delighted when he saw the shadow, and he hurriedly asked, "Brother Dark Addiction, did you succeed?" Dark Addiction's expression was extremely unsightly. "Martial spirit king, is there something wrong with you?" "Huh? Is there something wrong with your head?" The martial spirit king was stunned. "Brother Dark Addiction, what do you mean?" Dark Addiction said angrily, "What do I mean? Didn't you tell me that the young man is only a cultivator of the seamless path? Not a Destiny realm expert at all?" The martial spirit king said, "Yes. He's only a cultivator of the seamless path, not a Destiny realm expert at all. What's wrong? Did something go wrong?" Dark Addiction was furious. "Something went wrong? I almost didn't make it back." The martial spirit king said in a low voice, "Brother Dark Addiction, were you discovered by Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity?" Dark Addiction said coldly, "They didn't notice me." The martial spirit king was slightly puzzled. "Then?" Dark Addiction said angrily, "Then my ass. As soon as I entered the pavilion, that young man noticed me before my feet even touched the ground." "You actually said he's not a Destiny realm expert?" "Martial Spirit King, there's no enmity between us, so why are you trying to harm me? Fortunately, that senior didn't intend to kill me. Otherwise, would have fucking died there." The Martial Spirit King and Shenqin were dumbfounded. P.S. When will you become famous after writing for 5 years? Chapter 1934. King Martial Spirit spoke in a low voice, "Brother Dark Addiction, you said that Yi Xian noticed you?" Dark Addiction spoke in a low voice, "Do you think I'm lying to you?" King Martial Spirit and Shenqin exchanged glances, and there was a wisp of shock in their eyes. Shenqin spoke in a low voice, "I told you that fellow isn't simple." King Martial Spirit was about to speak, but Dark Addiction suddenly turned around. "Who is it?" The three of them turned around and saw a man walking over slowly from not too far away. It was Yi Xian. Their expressions were quite unsightly when they saw Yi Xian. It was especially so for Dark Addiction. Not only was his expression unsightly, there was even a wisp of fear in his eyes. Yi Xian gazed at Dark Addiction and smiled, "Is there enmity between you and King Martial Spirit and Miss Shenqin?" Dark Addiction fell silent. Meanwhile, King Martial Spirit spoke abruptly, "Yi Xian, you're not a Destiny realm expert at all." Yi Xian roared with laughter, "Destiny realm? King Martial Spirit, what a joke." As he spoke, he suddenly said, "Kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed. Hiss! The space here was instantly torn apart. King Martial Spirit's expression instantly changed drastically, and he charged forward and slammed his fist forward. A powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano, and it instantly caused the entire city to seethe. The expressions of all the experts within the city changed drastically, and they raised their heads to look up into the clouds. Bang! High above in the clouds, an expanse of sword light suddenly exploded, and then a middle-aged man retreated repeatedly. It was King Martial Spirit. As soon as King Martial Spirit stopped, his body instantly transformed into nothingness, and only his soul remained. It wasn't Yi Xian who attacked, but Su Wang who'd attained the origin spirit realm. King Martial Spirit gazed at Su Wang with disbelief. You've actually attained the origin spirit realm, and your combat strength is actually so terrifying. Dark Addiction and Shenqin's expressions were extremely unsightly as well. Both of them hadn't expected Su Wang's strength to be so terrifying. He shattered King Martial Spirit's body with a single strike of his sword. Meanwhile, Su Wang glanced coldly at King Martial Spirit, who only had his soul left. How dare trash like you scheme against my master? Master? King Martial Spirit narrowed his eyes. Who is your master? In the distance, Yi Xian smiled and said, Who do you think it is? King Martial Spirit's pupils suddenly constricted. You're just a seamless Dao, how can you be her master? Seamless Dao? Yi Xian laughed. Martial Spirit King, you are really too funny. King Martial Spirit said angrily, Yi Xian, stop pretending. If you have the ability, then do it yourself. Come, do it. You think you're worthy? At this moment, a voice came from the side. Everyone heard the voice and looked over. Not far away, Mu Sun and Old Man Profound Secrets were slowly walking over. Old Man Profound Secrets looked coldly at King Martial Numinous. An ant like you is worthy of a senior? King Martial Spirit stared at Old Man Profound Secrets. Old Man Profound Secrets, you have lived for millions of years. Is your intelligence so low? This guy is just using the seamless Dao. Can't you tell? Old Man Profound Secrets said angrily, shut up. King Martial Spirit, you're a veteran Essence Soul Realm powerhouse at any rate. Why is your intelligence so low? King Martial Spirit said angrily, we will know if he's at the Destiny Knowing Realm the moment he makes a move. Get him to make a move. Old Man Profound Secrets said angrily, how can an ant like you be worthy of a senior? Do you know that when we entered the ancient ruins, a senior instantly killed a Destiny Knowing Realm expert with a single sword strike? We saw it with our own eyes, so how can it be fake? King Martial Spirit was stunned, and then he said, absolutely impossible. This Yi Xian is just a human from a low-level civilization. It's impossible for him to be at the Destiny Knowing Realm. He's just an ant. Old Man Profound Secrets shook his head and looked at King Martial Spirit with a trace of pity in his eyes. This child is too stupid. There's no saving him. At this moment, Yi Xian smiled and said, kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, Xu Wang suddenly vanished on the spot. King Martial Spirit's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, Miss Shenqin, save me. Shenqin didn't stop Xu Wang, and she charged towards Yi Xian instead. She was very clearly aware that so long as everyone found out that Yi Xian was a fake Destiny Knowing Realm expert, then Yi Xian would be finished. Yi Xian smiled as he gazed at Shenqin, and he had no intention to attack. Meanwhile, Mu Sun obstructed Yi Xian's path while a wisp of viciousness flashed through his eyes. Are you even worthy of attacking a senior? As he spoke, he charged forward. Bang! Shenqin was forced to a stop by a powerful force. Shenqin was about to attack again when she seemed to have noticed something, and she suddenly turned around. A ray of light flashed from afar, and then the green profound sword pierced directly into the center of King Martial Spirit's forehead. After that, it started to madly absorb King Martial Spirit's soul. It was gone. The expressions of all the nascent soul realm experts in the surroundings turned slightly solemn when they witnessed this scene. After all of them were at the nascent soul realm, and their strengths were on par with King Martial Spirit. However, Xu Wang had been able to kill King Martial Spirit with 2 strikes of the sword. What did this mean? It meant that Xu Wang could kill them with 2 strikes of the sword as well. Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity exchanged glances. Since Xu Wang became Yi Xian's follower, his strength has grown at a terrifying rate. On the other side, Dark Addiction glanced at the surroundings, and then he vanished without a trace. Flee first. Yi Xian glanced at Dark Addiction, but he didn't stop him. Of course, he couldn't stop him as well. Yi Xian gazed at Shenqin and smiled, "Miss Shenqin, we've known each other for a long time, and I didn't intend to kill all of you. However, you've repeatedly challenged my patience, and I can't tolerate it any longer." As he spoke, he gazed at Xiuwang. Xiuwang understood his intentions, and he transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Hiss! The space here was instantly torn apart. Shenqin's expression instantly changed drastically. She suddenly pressed her palms together, and then she pressed them forward lightly. In an instant, countless strands of space suddenly condensed into a spatial wall. Defend! At this moment, the space where Shenqin resided was instantly impregnable. However, as soon as Xiuwang's attack arrived, the impregnable spatial wall was easily torn apart like tofu. Hiss! A strand of light pierced through the center of Shenqin's forehead. At the instant that it vanished, Xiuwang had appeared behind Shenqin. However, the green profound sword was still there. Instant kill. A deathly silence filled the surroundings. Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity's gazes had been constantly fixed on the green profound sword. At this moment, they'd noticed that it wasn't that Xiuwang's combat strength was too abnormal, it was the sword itself that was too abnormal. The sword's boost to Xiuwang's battle prowess was just too high. Shenqin gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. "You." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, "If I die, then so be it. Be more straightforward. Don't waste your breath. Have a safe journey." As soon as he finished speaking, he issued a command in his heart, and the green profound sword completely absorbed Shenqin's soul. Yi Xian smiled, "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Old Man Profundity spoke in a low voice, "Senior, the Wilderness God and Zhao Shenshao are on the other side. Should we?" Yi Xian glanced to the right and smiled, "I'm someone who doesn't offend me, so I won't be annoyed. Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished into the distance. Mu Sun, who stood by Old Man Profundity's side, suddenly smiled. It said that experts are capricious and have strange tempers. However, I feel that not only is Senior not capricious, but he's also willing to reason with others. Most importantly, he's approachable and easy to get along with. Old Man Profundity nodded and smiled. Senior is indeed approachable and has a warm personality. It's our fortune to have met Senior. Mu Sun shook his head and smiled. Miss Xiuwang is the greatest fortune. Old Man Profundity shook his head and smiled as well. Indeed, Old Man Profundity shook his head and smiled bitterly as well. Actually, the one who benefited the most was Xiuwang. This woman was absolutely invincible amongst those of the same realm of cultivation. Moments later, the two of them left. After the two of them left, Zhao Shenshao withdrew his gaze from the clouds and sighed softly. "I tried to persuade King Martial Spirit, but he just couldn't accept it. This unwillingness caused his millions of years of bitter cultivation to turn into nothingness." Next to him, Wilderness God smiled, "Greed." Zhao Shenshao looked into the distance with a complicated expression. "Wilderness God, do you think that young Master Yi is at the destiny-knowing state?" Wilderness God shook his head. "It's no longer important." Zhao Shenshao smiled. "I think it's quite important." "How should I put it?" "Think about it, if he really isn't at the destiny-knowing state, then why are Mu Sun and the others so loyal to him? Are they all idiots? Obviously not. Also, did you see that Xiuwang woman? She was only at the life god realm at the beginning, but she reached the primordial spirit realm not long after she followed Yi Xian. Most importantly, her combat strength has reached such a level. Do you think that's normal?" Wilderness God fell silent. Zhao Shenshao said, "There's something else. Didn't you notice? Mu Sun and the others are becoming more and more respectful to Yi Xian. If Yi Xian isn't at the destiny-knowing state, why would they be so respectful to him?" Wilderness God frowned. "You mean that Yi Xian is really at the destiny-knowing state?" Zhao Shenshao said, I can't be sure. But what I can be sure of is that even if Yi Xian isn't at the destiny-knowing state, he's definitely not an ordinary person. The wilderness god glanced at Zhao Shenshao, a little speechless. Isn't that obvious? That guy is dressed in divine equipment. Even if he isn't at the destiny-knowing state, there must be a destiny-knowing state big shot behind him. At this point, he didn't say anything else. Zhao Shenshao smiled, destiny-knowing state. Then, he looked into the distance with a complicated expression and said softly, do you think they'll get Yi Xian's help to break through the primordial spirit realm and reach the destiny-knowing state? Wilderness god's expression changed when he heard that. Zhao Shenshao said in a deep voice, it's not impossible. Wilderness god looked into the distance. Should we go and rely on him as well? Zhao Shenshao said nothing. After Yi Xian returned to the auction house, he continued to watch the auction. By then, he had already earned more than 500,000 heaven crystals. And the divine items were not even half sold. The lifetime collection of a destiny-knowing state super expert was naturally not an ordinary amount. Inside the pavilion, Xiuwang stood behind Yi Xian, holding the green profound sword in her hand. She was now Yi Xian's super bodyguard. At that moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the auction house below, the Zhao family wants all the divine items in today's auction. Everyone, please give my Zhao family some face. If it's what I want, don't bid. Chapter 1935. Young Master Zhao. Within the pavilion, Yi Xian frowned. Where did this young master come from? Meanwhile, Old Man Profound walked in and bowed slightly. Senior, someone from the Zhao clan has arrived. Yi Xian asked. The Zhao clan? Old Man Profound spoke in a low voice, a clan that doesn't belong to the extreme heaven dimension, and a life-knowing realm expert once appeared in their clan. A life-knowing realm expert. Yi Xian smiled, interesting. Old Man Profound's face was slightly gloomy, this young Master Zhao might be up to something. Yi Xian smiled, I'll go meet him. Old Man Profound hesitated for a moment and said, how could I ask Senior to make an appearance for such a small matter? You. Yi Xian shook his head, it's fine for me to get involved in some karma, but it's disadvantageous for all of you. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the door. Old Man Profound was rather moved, and he didn't think too much about it before hurriedly following Chen Shi out. Within the auction hall, Yi Xian walked over to young Master Zhao, and there was an old man behind him. The old man's aura was deep, and he was a soul essence realm expert. Yi Xian gazed at young Master Zhao and smiled, young Master Zhao, are you here to bid for a divine object? Young Master Zhao sized up Yi Xian, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, who are you? Yi Xian smiled, I'm here to bid for a divine object as well. As he spoke, he turned to look at Old Man Profound, let's begin. Old Man Profound glanced at young Master Zhao, and then he turned to look at an old man in the distance, let's begin. The old man nodded, and then he walked up to the auction platform. He withdrew a piece of black armor and said, everyone, this armor is called the Celestial Armor. It's extremely hard, and it can withstand a few dozen attacks from a soul essence realm expert without being damaged. The starting bid is 50,000 celestial crystals, 50,000 celestial crystals. Many people in the hall were slightly tempted when they heard this, but no one dared to make a bid. They just looked at young Master Zhao. Young Master Zhao suddenly smiled, 50,000. Yi Xian immediately said, 100,000. Hearing this, young Master Zhao looked at Yi Xian and smiled, you are not giving me any face. Yi Xian blinked, fair auction, fair auction. Young Master Zhao's lips curled into a cold smile. Fair auction? Yi Xian smiled and said, is there a problem? Young Master Zhao laughed, no problem. What's wrong with a dead person? As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed old man behind him suddenly grabbed Yi Xian with one hand. A powerful force was about to tear Yi Xian apart. However, someone was faster than him. Xiuwang suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Chi! A ray of sword light tore through the battlefield. Boom! The black-robed old man was pushed out of the hall, and at the instant he stopped moving, a sword pierced through the center of his forehead. Instant kill. Seeing this scene, young Master Zhao was instantly dumbfounded, and he was completely stunned. The green profound sword completely absorbed the black-robed old man's soul. At the same time, Xiuwang suddenly appeared behind young Master Zhao, and a sword was pressed against the back of his neck. Yi Xian looked at young Master Zhao and smiled. Now, you can inform your family members to come. Remember, ask them to bring more heaven-grade crystals. Young Master Zhao said angrily, are you trying to rob me? Xiuwang suddenly slashed down with his sword. Chi! Young Master Zhao's right arm was chopped off, and blood splattered. Young Master Zhao was shocked, and he hurriedly said, yes, we can talk this out. I'll ask my father. Yi Xian smiled, then you better hurry up. Young Master Zhao hurriedly said, all right. As he spoke, he took out a voice transmission talisman and crushed it. It didn't take long before a powerful aura appeared, and then an old man appeared before everyone. Seeing this person, young Master Zhao hurriedly said, Father, save me. Old man Profundity who stood by Yi Xian's side spoke solemnly, that's the patriarch of the Zhao clan, Zhao Qing. Zhao Qing paid no attention to young Master Zhao, and he gazed at Yi Xian instead. May I know how my Zhao clan has offended you? Yi Xian chuckled, you can ask your son. Zhao Qing turned around to look at young Master Zhao when he heard this. Young Master Zhao hurriedly said, Father, they bullied me. I didn't do anything. Zhao Qing's face was livid. Shut up. He knew what sort of person his son was. Zhao Qing gazed at Yi Xian, it's my fault for not disciplining him properly. Please show mercy. Yi Xian chuckled, and then he said, Xiuwang, let young Master Zhao go. Xiuwang nodded, and then he sheathed his sword and returned to stand behind Yi Xian. Zhao Qing cupped his fists, thank you. Yi Xian smiled, let's go. Meanwhile, young Master Zhao suddenly ridiculed, weren't you very capable just now? What, are you afraid now that my father is here? Zhao Qing suddenly slapped young Master Zhao across the face. Smack! A crisp sound of a slap rang out. Young Master Zhao was sent flying. Zhao Qing looked at Yi Xian, cupped his fists, and said, excuse me. With that, he disappeared with young Master Zhao. Yi Xian looked into the distance, smiled, and then turned to Old Man Profound, let's continue. Old Man Profound nodded, yes. The auction continued. Yi Xian took Xiuwang with him and left the place. Outside, high in the clouds, Zhao Qing looked down at Heaven's Fate City, silent. Beside him was young Master Zhao. Young Master Zhao asked in a low voice, Father, can you see through that youth? Zhao Qing shook his head. Young Master Zhao's expression was solemn. I wanted to provoke him into making a move, but he didn't. There are only two explanations. 1, he's really in the fate-aware state, and he doesn't want to make a move. 2, he's not in the fate-aware state, and he's been faking it all along. Zhao Qing was silent. Young Master Zhao said in a low voice, Father, he has an ancient relic treasure on him. We've coveted the relic for so long, but it ended up in his hands. Zhao Qing shook his head, that's why we have to be cautious. The relic is not ordinary, especially that space-time formation, and this person can actually break it. As he spoke, he shook his head again, this person is not simple. Young Master Zhao said in a low voice, Father, those treasures are secondary. The most important thing is the supreme-grade crystal mine. According to our estimations, there are at least 3 supreme-grade crystal mines, and those mines contain at least hundreds of thousands of supreme-grade sky-grade crystals. Apart from that, there might be countless ancient manuals and treasures. Supreme-grade crystal mine. Zhao Qing's face was dark. This was what he wanted the most. A supreme-grade crystal mine was enough to change the fate of a family. Young Master Zhao said again, he only has 3 primordial spirit realm experts by his side. Zhao Qing said, what if he's really in the fate-aware state? Young Master Zhao shook his head, impossible. If he's really in the fate-aware state, he would have killed me when I provoked him, not let me go. Not only would he not let me go, he would also not let the Zhao family off. But he chose not to do so, which means he's wary of us and wants to minimize the problem. Zhao Qing fell silent. Young Master Zhao said, I've already investigated. From the moment he entered Heaven's Fate City, he hasn't made a move. Of course, even if he's not in the fate-aware state, he's definitely not an ordinary person. As he spoke, he looked at Zhao Qing, Father, are you willing to make a bet? Zhao Qing slowly closed his eyes. Young Master Zhao glanced at Zhao Qing, not saying a word. After a long time, Zhao Qing opened his eyes. This fat piece of meat is not something the Zhao family can swallow. Come, let's go contact the Wang family. With that, he left with young Master Zhao. Not long after the two left, a shadow appeared on the scene. It was Dark Addiction. After a moment of silence, Dark Addiction turned and left. Not long after, Dark Addiction appeared in the small loft where Yi Xian was. Dark Addiction bowed slightly, Senior, it's as you expected. The Zhao family really has a plan. As he spoke, he repeated the conversation between the father and son of the Zhao family. Yi Xian smiled, not saying a word. Dark Addiction glanced at Yi Xian, Senior, are you going to annihilate the Zhao family? Yi Xian suddenly asked, Dark Addiction, how many heaven-grade crystals can you earn from a job? Dark Addiction said in a low voice, it depends on the target. If it's an assassin of the primordial soul realm, it'll be around 10,000. Yi Xian smiled, then do you know how many supreme-grade heaven-grade crystals are needed to advance from the primordial soul realm to the fate-aware state? Dark Addiction shook his head, I don't know. Yi Xian looked at Dark Addiction, at least 2 million supreme-grade heaven-grade crystals. 2 million. Hearing that, Dark Addiction and Xiuwang were stunned. After a while, Dark Addiction smiled bitterly, no wonder there are so few fate-aware state cultivators in the world. 2 million heaven-grade crystals. I'm afraid the entire Heaven's Fate City doesn't have that many. Xiuwang's expression also turned gloomy. 2 million supreme-grade heaven-grade crystals. Not to mention supreme-grade heaven-grade crystals, even ordinary heaven-grade crystals would make her despair. As for supreme-grade heaven-grade crystals, she didn't dare to think about it anymore. Yi Xian smiled, under normal circumstances, it's impossible for you to reach the fate-aware state. However, there are many abnormal situations in this world. Hearing that, Dark Addiction quickly said, Senior, what do you mean? Yi Xian smiled, I have a plan. Listen to it. Dark Addiction quickly said, okay. Yi Xian smiled, the fastest way to earn money isn't to earn money. It's to borrow. Borrow. Dark Addiction and Xiuwang were confused. Yi Xian looked at Dark Addiction, if you trust me, follow me from now on. I guarantee you that you will reach the fate-aware state in 100 years. Dark Addiction was stunned. Then, he quickly bowed, from now on, I, Dark Addiction, will follow your orders. Yi Xian smiled, help me to keep an eye on them. Inform me immediately if they do anything. Remember, don't let them discover you. Then, he paused and said, the game has to be played slowly for it to be interesting. Dark Addiction nodded, I understand. Having said that, he disappeared quietly. After Dark Addiction left, Xiuwang asked, Master, do I really need that many heaven-grade crystals to reach the fate-aware state? Yi Xian nodded, maybe even more. Dark Addiction's expression turned gloomy. Yi Xian smiled, don't worry. Just follow me. I'll find a way to help you reach the fate-aware state. Xiuwang looked at Yi Xian, Master, why are you so nice to me? Yi Xian was stunned. Then, he smiled, you're my disciple. If I don't treat you well, who will? Huh. Xiuwang looked at Yi Xian, lowered his head slightly, and said nothing. P.S. Yesterday, I went back from my hometown and spent the whole day on the bus. I slept until now. Update late. Sorry. Chapter 1936. After the auction ended, Yi Xian obtained a total of 1,500,000 heavenly supreme crystals. That was only 500,000 supreme-grade heavenly supreme crystals. What troubled him the most was that Sister Shui had already used up more than 1 million supreme-grade heavenly supreme crystals. Judging from the current situation, it might not be enough. Yi Xian gave all the heavenly supreme crystals he obtained from the auction to Sister Shui. Now, he only had tens of thousands of supreme-grade heavenly supreme crystals with him. Of course, Yi Xian did not spend all his time acting tough. He was also cultivating. His current goal was to reach the Fate Matrix realm. This was not difficult for him. All he needed was some time. 3 days later. 30 years had passed in Xiao Ta's body. Now, Yi Xian had reached the Fate Matrix realm. On the huge rock, Yi Xian took a deep breath greedily. Although he was only at the Fate Matrix realm, he could definitely fight an Essence Soul realm expert. After all, he had the green profound sword and the mysterious space-time. A moment later, Yi Xian arrived at Sister Shui's cultivation place. At this moment, Yang Nianxue showed no signs of breaking through. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. Because Sister Shui had less than 200,000 heavenly supreme crystals left. It was still not enough. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he turned around and left. He had to find a way to get some heavenly supreme crystals for Sister Shui. Damn it! Once Sister Shui reached the fate-knowing realm, he would be able to rise. Sister Shui was not as heartless as his father. A moment later, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, Dark Addiction appeared in front of him. Dark Addiction said solemnly, Senior, the Zhao family has joined forces with the Wang family to kill you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The Wang family? Dark Addiction nodded. The Zhao family and the Wang family are both major families. They once produced life-knowing realm experts. They are very powerful. Yi Xian smiled. How are they going to kill me? Dark Addiction said solemnly, I don't know. All I know is that they have gathered almost 28 Essence Soul realm experts. 28. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Damn it, when did Primordial Soul realm experts become so worthless? Was there something wrong with him? How could he continue to act tough like this? Dark Addiction continued, it's clear that they don't want to underestimate you, but they probably don't know that you're really at the fate-aware realm. Not to mention 28 Primordial Soul realm experts, even 280 Primordial Soul realm experts are ants. Yi Xian was speechless. Dark Addiction said, Senior, they might make a move in the next few days. Yi Xian smiled and said, why are they able to gather so many Primordial Soul realm experts? Dark Addiction said, Foundation. Such a large family clan usually has a deep heritage. It's normal for them to have more than 10 Essence Soul realm experts. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Dark Addiction asked in a deep voice, what does Senior plan to do next? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. What else can I do? Destroy them, of course. Dark Addiction nodded. If Senior makes a move, you can destroy these two clans with a flip of your hand. Yi Xian shook his head. I won't make a move. Dark Addiction was shocked. Why? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. These ants are not worthy for me to make a move. Dark Addiction hesitated for a moment and said, that's true. However, if Senior doesn't make a move, and they come for you, Senior, Yi Xian smiled and said, just listen to my orders. Dark Addiction quickly said, yes, Senior. With that, he quietly disappeared and hid himself. After Dark Addiction left, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. Damn it! 28 Primordial Soul Realm Experts. They thought too highly of him. Su Wang and the others were definitely no match for them. Moreover, he had to make a move. If he did not make a move, Su Wang and the others would definitely not be able to defeat them. Headache. The more Yi Xian thought about it, the more headache he felt. He actually wanted to sneak back to find Aunt Ding. Aunt Ding had a sword light in her hand. Who was she afraid of? But the problem was that it was too late for him to sneak away now. They would definitely not allow him to return to the women's academy. Yi Xian quickly looked at Yang Nianxue. Her aura was still as calm as still water, and there was no sign of a breakthrough. Yi Xian's headache intensified when he saw that. I can only rely on myself. Suddenly, a woman walked into the room. Su Wang turned to look at her, and his eyes narrowed slightly. The green profound sword in his hand trembled, and he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, let her come here. It was Xiong Ho. Xiong Ho walked over to Yi Xian, glanced at Su Wang, and then looked at Yi Xian with a smile, let's have a chat. Yi Xian nodded. Su Wang, go help old man Xuanji. Su Wang bowed slightly and retreated. Xiong Ho looked at Yi Xian. The Zhao and Wang families have gathered 32 Essence Soul Realm experts. Not only that, but they've also hired some Essence Soul Realm mercenaries from other places. A conservative estimate is that there are at least 50 Essence Soul Realm experts. 50. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Have they gone mad? 50. Xiong Ho licked her candied fruit and said, who's to blame? You blame yourself. You've put on too much of a show. They don't dare to underestimate you. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiong Ho continued. For now, I think you're finished. Because they won't allow you to rush back to the women's academy. Even if you rush back, Miss Ding's sword light might not be enough. As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian with a spurious smile. After putting on an act for so long, you're finally finished. Yi Xian was expressionless. You seem to be gloating. Xiong Ho giggled. It feels good, Yi Xian was speechless. Xiong Ho asked again, what did you get from the ancient relic? Yi Xian smiled. A few supreme-grade mineral veins. Xiong Ho said in a low voice, no wonder they paid such a high price to target you. A few supreme-grade mineral veins could allow them to cultivate another life-knowing state expert. They'll definitely fight for it. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. What's your next plan? Yi Xian was silent. Plan? He wanted to surrender now. Xiong Ho continued. You can't run now. If you run, they won't have any scruples. Right now, they're still wary of you. Yi Xian smiled. Then what do you think I should do? Xiong Ho looked at Yi Xian. Call for help. Yi Xian smiled. Call for who? Xiong Ho looked straight at Yi Xian. Call for the people behind you. The people behind him. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. He wanted to call for help, but he couldn't sense Qing. He didn't want to call for Qing himself either. If he troubled Qing for everything, wouldn't that make him look like a second-generation heir? Of course, if others went to look for Qing it would have nothing to do with him. As for his father, he'd already forgotten about him. Xiongho said, "You have no other choice but to call for help." She rose and left. In the hall, Yi Xian was silent. After a long time, he shook his head with a smile. What had he not seen before? Wasn't it just 50 or so primordial spirits? Inside the hall, Yi Xian was silent. Somewhere high in the clouds, Zhao Qing found Zhao Shenshao and the god of wilderness. Zhao Qing smiled. "Are you two interested in joining us?" Zhao Shenshao smiled. "Lord Zhao, that's a life-knowing state expert." Zhao Qing shook his head. "Don't you two have any idea whether he's a life-knowing state expert or not?" Zhao Shenshao smiled, but said nothing. Zhao Qing wanted to say something else, but the god of wilderness suddenly laughed. "You two chat." With that, he turned and left. Zhao Qing glanced at the god of wilderness, then at Zhao Shenshao. Zhao Shenshao smiled. "Lord Zhao, I won't be participating in this. Farewell." With that, he too turned and disappeared into the horizon. Zhao Qing was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "Gutless." With that, he turned and left. On the other side, the god of wilderness murmured, "They're going to make a move on Yi Xian." Zhao Shenshao said in a low voice. "Clearly, they think Yi Xian isn't a life-knowing state expert." The god of wilderness smiled. "What do you think?" Zhao Shenshao shook his head. "Again, whether he's a life-knowing state expert or not, he's no ordinary person. This Zhao Qing is only looking for the two of us to be cannon fodder." The god of wilderness smiled. "Who do you think will win?" After a moment of silence, Zhao Shenshao said, "If Yi Xian isn't a life-knowing state expert, then he's finished." The god of wilderness said, "He's not a life-knowing state expert." Zhao Shenshao smiled. "Why do you say so?" The god of wilderness said softly, "If he really was a life-knowing state expert, he would have wiped out the Zhao and Wang families with a single slap." Zhao Shenshao smiled. "Indeed." The god of wilderness smiled. "Let's wait and see." Inside the loft, Yi Xian got up and left. As soon as he stepped out of the pavilion, Old Man Profound Ji appeared beside Yi Xian. Old Man Profound Ji said in a deep voice, "Senior, there are many unknown and mysterious auras around Heaven's Terminus City. I just went to investigate, and they are all primordial spirit realm experts. Some of them are from the Zhao clan. The Zhao family." Yi Xian looked back. Not far away, Dark Addiction showed up quietly. Dark Addiction said, "Senior, there are at least 40 primordial spirit experts gathered outside. Not only that, but there are also some assassins lurking in the shadows. They've been spying on us all this time." Mu Sun also appeared. Mu Sun looked at the distant horizon and frowned. Have they gone mad? How dare they covet Senior's wealth? Old Man Profound sneered. They dare do this because they think Senior isn't a life-knowing state expert. A bunch of ignorant fools. Mu Sun looked at Yi Xian. Senior, do you have other plans for them? Yi Xian smiled but said nothing. At this moment, two middle-aged men appeared in the sky. One of them was Zhao Qing, and the other was the Wang family's patriarch, Wang Shao. Zhao Qing looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Young Master Yi, we've investigated your background." Yi Xian said with a smile, "My background?" Zhao Qing stared at Yi Xian. "You're not a life-knowing state expert." As he spoke, he flicked his finger and several scrolls landed in front of Mu Sun, Old Man Profound, Mu Jianghe, and Xiwang. Zhao Qing smiled. "Everyone, this is young Master Ye's information. Take a look and you'll know if I'm telling the truth." Mu Sun and the others looked at each other but didn't make a move. At this moment, Xiwang suddenly grabbed the scroll in front of him and exerted force. The scroll turned to ashes. Chapter 1937. Mu Sun and Old Man Profundity exchanged glances, and then they destroyed the scrolls in front of them. Mu Jianghe destroyed the scrolls as well. Zhao Qing shook his head and smiled when he witnessed this scene. Young Master Yi, you're really amazing. You actually made these nascent soul realm experts be so loyal to you. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Both of you can leave. Old Man Profundity and Mu Sun smiled bitterly when they heard Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at them, and then he smiled. Both of you should be aware of my true strength, right? Mu Sun nodded. To be honest, we've investigated young Master Yi. Moreover, there are many things about young Master Yi that can't stand up to scrutiny. For example, young Master Yi never takes the initiative to attack, and he's always scaring others. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Both of you can leave. Both of them glanced at each other and were slightly hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. Staying here would just be like dying for nothing. Go. After all, both of you don't owe me anything. Mu Sun remained silent for a moment, and then he bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The reason he'd stayed earlier was mainly because he wanted to see if Yi Xian had any trump cards. But now it seemed like Yi Xian didn't have any. The gap in their strengths was too huge, and he didn't want to take the gamble. After Mu Sun left, Old Man Profundity cupped his fists. Young Master Yi, take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished as well. Yi Xian gazed at Mu Jianghe. Mu Jianghe hesitated for a long time, and then he glanced at the 50-plus nascent soul realm experts in the sky. In the end, he sighed softly. Take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Actually, he slightly wanted to stay because Yi Xian had really killed his previous master. However, he knew that Yi Xian wasn't at the life-knower realm. Staying was equivalent to taking a huge gamble, and he didn't want to gamble with his life. After Mu Jianghe left, Yi Xian looked at Xuang in front of him and said, "You should leave too." Xuang shook his head. "I'll accompany you." Yi Xian laughed and said, "You will die." Xuang shook his head again. "I'll go with you." Yi Xian shook his head. "I'm not a fate knower." Xuang looked straight at Yi Xian. "I know." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Why did you still stay here?" Su Wang looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let's go. This is my own problem, I will face it myself." However, Xuang still did not say anything. He refused to leave. Yi Xian had a headache. "There's no point in you staying here. Do you understand?" Xuang just stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian still wanted to say something. Meanwhile, Zhao Qing laughed and said, "Since she refuses to leave, then she can accompany young Master Yi in death." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and a terrifying pressure suddenly swept down from the sky. Meanwhile, Xuang suddenly shot into the sky with the green profound sword in hand. "Ohm!" The howl of a sword shook the sky. The moment Su Wang made his move, 6 afterimages suddenly appeared around him in a strange manner. Bang! The sword light shattered, and Xuang was blasted back over 3 kilometers. As soon as she stopped, a few afterimages arrived silently. A ferocious look flashed through Xuang's eyes, and she slashed down with her sword. Bang! One of the afterimages was blasted away. She was just about to attack again to deal a fatal blow when another afterimage arrived. Xuang roared in rage and swept her sword horizontally. Bang! A wave of sword light shook the surroundings, and the afterimages were blasted back. Zhao Qing's face fell when he saw this. Wang Shao, who stood by his side, said solemnly, "The sword in that woman's hand." As he spoke, a wisp of greed flashed through his eyes. How could they not realize that one of the main reasons why Xiuwang's combat strength was so terrifying was because of that sword? It was a super divine weapon. Although Xiuwang was holding the green profound sword, she was only one person while there were 6 of them. Moreover, they had no intention of killing her, and they were only trying to keep her busy. Of course, they couldn't kill her as well. Xiuwang's combat strength was too terrifying when she held the green profound sword. Although it was 1 against 6, Xiuwang was still able to suppress them. However, she was being kept busy as well. Yi Xian glanced at Xiuwang and shook his head with a sigh, silly girl. He really hadn't expected that Xiuwang would risk her life for him after finding out that he wasn't at the destiny-knowing state. Meanwhile, Zhao Qing suddenly smiled, "Young Master Yi, if you hand over the Heaven Supreme crystals, I can let you die with dignity." Yi Xian smiled, "The Heaven Supreme crystals are in my body. You can take them yourself." Zhao Qing's eyes narrowed slightly, "Young Master Yi, are you still trying to frighten me at a time like this?" Yi Xian shook his head and chuckled, "You really talk a lot." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through Zhao Qing's eyes, and then he took a step forward and smashed his fist down. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. It wasn't the green profound sword. But he'd utilized the spatial pressure of that mysterious expanse of space. Bang! Everyone watched as Zhao Qing was actually blasted 3 kilometers away by Yi Xian's attack. Moreover, the expanse of space where Yi Xian's attack descended had actually been obliterated. Even the 11th layer of space had been obliterated. Everyone in the surroundings was shocked when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian wasn't at the destiny-knowing state, but this fellow was even more terrifying than a destiny-knowing state cultivator. He'd repulsed a nascent soul realm cultivator at the destiny-knowing state. Mu Sun and the old man Profound Secrets exchanged glances in the shadows, and there was a wisp of shock in both their eyes. They hadn't imagined that Yi Xian would actually be such a monstrous genius. A destiny realm cultivator actually possessed such terrifying strength. It was too terrifying. On the other side, Xiongho, who was licking her tonghulu, had stopped as well, and her eyes were filled with disbelief as she gazed at Yi Xian. She hadn't imagined that Yi Xian's strength would have actually arrived at such a level. Isn't the growth of this fellow's strength a little too abnormal? Zhao Qing, who stood before Yi Xian, was slightly stunned as well. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian's attack would heavily injure him. Yes, it was a heavy injury. That attack from Yi Xian had heavily injured him and even almost destroyed his body. Even though he'd been careless, Yi Xian was only at the destiny realm. A monstrous genius. Zhao Qing stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You're truly a monstrous genius." Yi Xian shook his head and chuckled. It was a pity that his previous attack lacked a bit of power. Otherwise, it would have been enough to instantly kill Zhao Qing. This also made him understand that with his current strength, he no longer had to fear a primordial spirit expert. Of course, he wouldn't be afraid of one, but he would be at his wit's end if there were dozens of them. Beside Zhao Qing, Wang Xiao said in a low voice, "Brother Zhao Qing, this fellow's background isn't ordinary." Viciousness flashed in Zhao Qing's eyes. "So what if he's not ordinary? We have no way out now, so we must kill him." Wang Xiao nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Patriarch Zhao, let's have a duel." A duel. Zhao Qing looked at Yi Xian with an incomparably savage expression. "Yi Xian, why should I have a duel with you?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm only in the Fate Matrix realm, but you're already in the Primordial Spirit realm." "What, are you afraid?" Zhao Qing stared at Yi Xian without a word. Yi Xian continued, "Patriarch Zhao, what is the greatest taboo for a cultivator?" "Fear is the greatest taboo. If you don't even dare to accept my challenge as a Fate Matrix realm cultivator, what's the point of cultivating? As for the Fate Matrix realm, there's no need for you to cultivate. Anyone who has reached the life-knowing realm has always been fearless, but people like you. He shook his head with a smile and didn't say anything else. Zhao Qing glared venomously at Yi Xian. You're trying to ruin my Dao heart. Yi Xian laughed heartily. Ruin your Dao heart? Patriarch Xiao, if your Dao heart is strong, why do you need me to ruin it? Your Dao heart is ruined because it's not strong enough. Why is your Dao heart not strong enough? That's because you're afraid. Zhao Qing snarled, Yi Xian. He was about to attack when Wang Xiao stopped him. He looked at Zhao Qing and said, Brother Zhao Qing, if you really attack, you'll be falling into this guy's trap. Zhao Qing fell silent and his expression gradually returned to normal. Wang Xiao looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, your strength is nothing but your eloquence is impressive. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. If you don't dare to fight me one-on-one, then forget it. As he spoke, he sensed Yang Nianxue in his body. She was still cultivating and showed no signs of a breakthrough. Moreover, she only had about 100,000 extreme heaven crystals left. Yi Xian sighed in his heart. Sister Xue is unreliable. Suddenly, Yang Nianxue's voice rang in Yi Xian's mind. Dad, we don't have enough extreme heaven crystals. Hurry up and get some for me. Yi Xian's expression froze. Sister, I'm being surrounded by dozens of primordial spirit realm cultivators. Can you come out and help me fight? Yang Nianxue did not respond. Yi Xian asked again, Did Dad give you anything that can save your life? Lend it to me first. I'll return it to you when I'm done. Yang Nianxue still did not respond. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, Sister, say something. I'm at my wit's end. Still no response. Yi Xian's expression froze. Suddenly, Wang Xiao looked at Zhao Qing and asked, Are there any experts approaching? Zhao Qing closed his eyes slowly. After a while, he shook his head. My men said there are no experts nearby. Wang Xiao nodded. In fact, they were afraid that Yi Xian would have reinforcements. Therefore, they had left some experts to keep an eye on the surroundings because they were afraid that Yi Xian would have reinforcements. Zhao Qing looked at Yi Xian in the distance, his expression cold. Kill. The experts behind him were about to swarm Zhao Qing. Yi Xian's expression changed when he saw this. He hurriedly said, Zhao Qing, fight me one-on-one if you can. Zhao Qing grinned. One-on-one? I have the advantage in numbers. Why should I fight you one-on-one? He waved his hand. Attack. Almost 40 strong primordial spirit realm cultivators behind him dashed toward Yi Xian as soon as he finished speaking. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Damn it, they're ganging up on me. How immoral. Just as Yi Xian was about to activate his bloodline power and fight to the death, a powerful aura suddenly swept over from the starry sky. The sudden turn of events caused everyone's expression to change. They looked up and saw the starry sky suddenly split open. Almost 10,000 people charged out, and the people leading them were life knowers. There were 6 life knowers. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why were there so many life knowers? Behind these 6, the 10,000 people were all peak primordial spirit realm experts. In the starry sky, the middle-aged man who led the group was shocked when he saw Yi Xian. In the next moment, he and the 10,000 experts behind him appeared in front of Yi Xian. The middle-aged man said in a trembling voice, Yi. Greetings, young Master Yi. As he said that, he bowed deeply. Behind him, everyone knelt down on one knee in unison, everyone was petrified. P.S. I had my wisdom tooth pulled yesterday. I'm about to break down. Do you have any friends who have had their teeth pulled? Some readers told me that after a tooth is pulled, you can drip a drop of balm on it to make it more comfortable. Is that true? Chapter 1938. Needless to say, everyone in the surroundings was stunned at this moment. 6 destiny knowers. 10,000 primordial spirits. Where did all these experts come from? Yi Xian was also a little confused. Who were these strong people in front of him? Why were they so respectful to him? Did he have a special identity that no one knew about? For a moment, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The middle-aged man in front of Yi Xian quickly said, "It's normal that you don't know us. This is our first time meeting you." He approached Yi Xian and whispered, "We know young Master Ye's sister." Sister? Yi Xian's eyes widened. The one in the plain dress? The middle-aged man nodded. Qing, Yi Xian's mind went blank. Where did Qing, find so many terrifyingly strong experts for him? Zhao Qing suddenly asked, "You are?" The middle-aged man in front of Yi Xian turned to look at Zhao Qing, then at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, is this your friend?" Yi Xian shook his head. "They want to gang up on me." The middle-aged man was furious. "How dare you?" After saying that, he turned to look at Zhao Qing, and an invisible pressure shrouded Zhao Qing. "How dare you disrespect young Master Yi? How dare you?" Zhao Qing and the others were dumbfounded by his words. Young Master Yi? Where did this young Master Yi come from? Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. "How should I address you, sir?" The middle-aged man replied, "Grand Heavenly Venerate." He seemed to have thought of something and quickly added, "Young Master Yi can just call me Mu Yunxi." Yi Xian smiled. "I'll call you Senior." The middle-aged man's expression changed. He quickly said, "No, no. You can't. I wouldn't dare be young Master Ye's senior. Young Master Yi can call me Mu Yunxi. If you're not used to it, you can call me Grand Heavenly Venerate." Yi Xian nodded. "Then I'll call you Grand Heavenly Venerate." The Grand Heavenly Venerate nodded. "All right." Zhao Qing and the others were flabbergasted by this scene. How could a destiny-knowing expert be so respectful to Yi Xian? That was the fate-knowing state. Where did this second generation come from? Why have I never heard of it? Zhao Qing and the rest began to panic. God Huangyuan and Zhao Shenxiao's expressions were extremely solemn, and they rejoiced in their luck. It was fortunate that he didn't join the Zhao and Wang clans, otherwise, he would be dead. On the other side, Mu Sen and Old Man Profound Secrets had bitter expressions on their faces. They knew that Yi Xian was definitely not a simple character, but they didn't expect Yi Xian to be this extraordinary. They knew that they had lost a great opportunity, one that could have allowed them to reach the destiny-knowing state. It was too late for regrets. Xiongho's face was also filled with confusion. She knew that there was someone behind Yi Xian, but she didn't expect the person behind Yi Xian to be so terrifying. 6 destiny knowers and tens of thousands of primordial spirits. What kind of divine force was this? Fierce Ho fell into a deep silence. In the distance, Zhao Qing quickly said, "Your Excellency, this is a misunderstanding." The Grand Heavenly Sovereign ignored Zhao Qing and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian faintly smiled. "Zhao family head, what kind of misunderstanding is this?" Zhao Qing bowed slightly and said with a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi, it is our fault. We were blind and offended young Master Yi. I ask young Master Yi." Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "Kill them all. Leave none alive." Hearing this, Zhao Qing was stunned. The next moment, his expression became ferocious. "Yi Xian, do you have to be so ruthless? My ancestor was also at the destiny-knowing state. Don't you know that it is better to leave a way out for others in the future?" Yi Xian shook his head. "There is no future. Because the Zhao family will be wiped out." Zhao Qing wanted to say something, but the Grand Heavenly Sovereign waved his right hand. In an instant, all the experts behind him attacked. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Leave their souls alive." The Grand Heavenly Sovereign nodded and disappeared. A bloody scene appeared. The bodies of the experts from the Zhao clan and Wang clan exploded one after another like fireworks. It was an extremely bloody sight. In less than a breath of time, a few dozen nascent soul realm experts had perished. Zhao Qing and the others were stunned. They didn't even have the ability to fight back. They hadn't imagined that they wouldn't be able to fight back at all when facing a destiny-knowing state expert. Is the gap between us that huge? Wang Shao gazed at Yi Xian and spoke with a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi, we." Meanwhile, Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and the green profound sword suddenly flew out and entered the center of Wang Zhao's forehead. After that, it swiftly started absorbing Wang Zhao's soul. Zhao Qing and the others were horrified when they witnessed this scene, and they intended to resist. However, a mysterious force suppressed them, causing them to be unable to move at all. They could only watch as the green profound sword absorbed their souls one by one. Despair. Zhao Qing knew that he was finished. The Zhao clan was finished as well. He'd offended someone he shouldn't have. Zhao Qing gazed resentfully at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, I curse you. I curse your entire family to be annihilated." His entire family to be annihilated? Yi Xian blinked. "I'm not panicking at all." Zhao Qing intended to say something else, but the green profound sword suddenly entered the center of his forehead, and then his soul was instantly absorbed completely. In less than 10 minutes, the souls of all the nascent soul realm experts present here had been completely absorbed. After it absorbed the souls of all the nascent soul realm experts, the green profound sword's aura rose explosively. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he witnessed this scene. The green profound sword might be on the verge of breaking through again. After all, there were almost 50 nascent soul realm experts here. Yi Xian put the green profound sword away, and then he placed it within Xiao Ta so that little soul could slowly break through. After that, Yi Xian turned around to gaze at Xiwang who stood nearby. At this moment, Xiwang's countenance was pale, and he was covered in injuries. The green profound sword had exhausted a huge amount of energy, and she'd fought 6 enemies by herself just now. So, she'd suffered injuries. Yi Xian smiled. "Go into Xiao Ta and recuperate first." Xiwang nodded, and then he entered Xiao Ta. Yi Xian looked at the Grand Heavenly Venerate, who hurriedly bowed slightly. "What can I do for you, young Master Yi?" Yi Xian asked softly. "Where did you meet Qing, The Grand Heavenly Venerate replied solemnly, "The faraway burial zone." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Burial zone?" The Grand Heavenly Venerate nodded. "Most of the destiny-knowing state experts are there now. Everyone is researching the realms above the destiny-knowing state." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." With that, he opened his palm, and countless spatial rings flew into his hand. These spatial rings belonged to Zhao Qing and the others. He glanced at them, and all of them added up to more than 1,000,000 extreme heaven crystals. They weren't supreme grade. Yi Xian glanced at Big Sister Shui who was in Xiao Ta. At this moment, there were only a few tens of thousands of extreme heaven crystals around Big Sister Shui. Yi Xian sighed softly, and then he placed all the extreme heaven crystals before Yang Nianxue. Meanwhile, Yang Nianxue's voice suddenly resounded, "Brother, I knew you wouldn't disappoint me." Yi Xian felt a headache coming on when he heard this. The Grand Heavenly Venerate glanced at the surroundings and said, "Young Master Yi, are you coming to the burial zone with us?" Yi Xian gazed at the Grand Heavenly Venerate. "The burial zone?" The Grand Heavenly Venerate nodded. "It's much more suitable to develop there. There are too few extreme heaven crystals here. Simply speaking, the resources here aren't enough to nurture many destiny-knowing state experts. No, it should be said that it's impossible to nurture any destiny-knowing state experts here. The resources required to nurture a destiny-knowing state expert are too huge. This place is too small, and there are too few resources here. It's not suitable for development. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. I'll think about it. The Grand Heavenly Venerate nodded slightly, all right. As he spoke, he glanced up into the sky and said, we'll be waiting for young Master Yi. If young Master Yi needs anything, just let me know. Yi Xian nodded, all right. The Grand Heavenly Venerate bowed slightly once more, and then he led the others away. As for Yi Xian, he headed directly to the Zhao clan and Wang clan. The resources and reserves of these two great clans were extraordinarily deep, and they definitely had countless divine treasures and extreme heaven crystals. It would be a waste not to take them. After Yi Xian left, Mu Sen and Old Man Profundity shook their heads and smiled bitterly. They knew that Xuang had profited greatly. Xuang hadn't left Yi Xian even when he faced a life-and-death situation. So, based on Yi Xian's character, would he mistreat her? He definitely wouldn't. Yi Xian would definitely do everything in his power to help her attain the destiny-knowing state. Mu Sen shook his head and sighed. Hard work and natural talent are important in life, but fortune is even more important. If we lose this fortune today, then we'll probably never be able to break through again in our lifetimes. Old Man Profundity's expression was dim. Mu Sen smiled bitterly. It's fate. Fate. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Old Man Profundity remained silent for a long time before he turned around and left as well. On the other side, Mu Jianghe had extremely complicated emotions in his heart. At the beginning, he'd wanted to stay behind like Xuang and face the Zhao and Wang clans with Yi Xian. But in the end, he didn't want to gamble with his life. After all, he only had one life. Now, he'd managed to keep his life. But he'd lost a chance to change his fate. Fate. Mu Jianghe sighed softly, and then he turned around and left. Xiongho silently licked her candied haws in the clouds. After a long time, she sighed softly as well, turned around, and left. She'd given up in the end. The current Yi Xian wasn't someone she could scheme against. Not to mention the Grand Heavenly Venerates and the others, she might not even be able to defeat Yi Xian herself. After all, this fellow was covered in divine treasures. In the starry sky, an old man beside the Grand Heavenly Venerate asked, Grand Heavenly Venerate, are you really going to bring young Master Yi to the burial zone? Grand Empyrean whispered, what? You're not willing? The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior didn't ask us to take young Master Yi with us. Idiot. Grand Empyrean was a bit angry. Think about it. If we leave with young Master Yi, what would that mean? This means that we have a relationship with that senior. The old man was stunned. Grand Heavenly Venerate continued, we follow young Master Yi, and young Master Yi's backer is our backer. Do you understand? The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, I understand. Grand Empyrean was brilliant. This subordinate admires you. Grand Heavenly Venerate looked into the distance and whispered, a great god who has surpassed the life-knowing realm but is unknown. We must cling to him. Chapter 1939. Yi Xian got more than 1 million Supreme Heavenly Crystals and 300,000 Supreme Heavenly Crystals in total after visiting the Zhaos and the Wangs. Both clans' resources had fallen into Yi Xian's hands. Of course, they hadn't fallen into his hands either because he'd given them to Yang Nianxue. Sister Shue's cultivation was simply a bottomless pit. Now, he'd already used up almost 2 million heaven crystals. However, he still hadn't broken through his limit. Even he was on the verge of collapsing. She was his biological sister. He couldn't just ignore her. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. A short while later, Yi Xian arrived before Xuang. At this moment, Xiuang's injuries were almost fully healed. Xiuang didn't speak when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian sized Xiuang up and said, "Did you know that you would die if you stayed behind?" Xiuang nodded but didn't speak. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Then why did you stay behind? Aren't you afraid of death?" Xiuang glanced at Yi Xian. "You're my master, and I'm your disciple." Yi Xian chuckled, "But I'm not at the fate-enlightened realm." Xiuang looked Yi Xian in the eye. "You're my master. It has nothing to do with you being at the fate-enlightened realm." Yi Xian fell silent for a long time, and then he grinned. "Follow me from now on. I'll take good care of you." Xiuang nodded. "All right." After Yi Xian left Xiaota, he went up into the stars and looked for the Grand Heavenly Venerate. The Grand Heavenly Venerate hurriedly bowed when he saw Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian chuckled. "There's no need to be so polite in the future. I'm not used to it." The Grand Heavenly Venerate hesitated for a moment before he nodded. "I'll listen to you." Yi Xian looked up into the stars and said, "How long will it take to get to the burial zone?" The Grand Heavenly Venerate spoke solemnly. "Half a month." "Half a month." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Let's go to the burial zone." It was as Grand Empyrean had said, this place couldn't cultivate many Fate Realm cultivators. If he and Su Wang wanted to reach the Fate Realm, they would have to go to the burial zone to find more resources. Yi Xian never thought that he would have to worry about money one day. A moment later, they set off for the burial zone. Right at this moment, the azure profound sword suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian held the azure profound sword and said with a smile, "Little Hun, you've broken through?" Little Soul said excitedly, "He broke through." Yi Xian laughed. "It's good that you've broken through." As he spoke, he slowly closed his eyes and carefully felt the Qingxian sword. Sure enough, the green profound sword had become different. If he were to wield the green profound sword now, he could easily kill an Essence Soul Realm expert. At this time, Grand Empyrean suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, this sword, can I have a look?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "Of course." As he spoke, he handed the green profound sword to Grand Empyrean. Grand Empyrean took the green profound sword and looked at it. His expression instantly became serious. "This sword is extraordinary." Yi Xian glanced at Grand Empyrean and said with a smile, "I made it." After saying this, he immediately regretted it. "Damn it! I've been showing off for too long, I can't stop." Hearing Yi Xian's words, Grand Empyrean was stunned. Then he glanced at Yi Xian and didn't dare to say anything. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. "This sword was made by Qing, as a gift for me to play with." A woman in a plain dress. Grand Empyrean said solemnly, "No wonder. If this sword falls into the hands of a Fate Realm swordsman, it will be too terrifying." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Is there a Fate Realm swordsman in the burial zone?" Grand Empyrean nodded. "There is. But there are very few. I know that Dao Yi is also a peerless swordsman." Yi Xian slightly nodded. After going to the burial zone, he must cultivate Su Wang to the Fate Realm as soon as possible. As for himself, he wasn't in a rush because he had just reached the Fate Realm. At this time, Grand Empyrean returned the sword to Yi Xian. Yi Xian put away the green profound sword and said, "Empyrean, you can tell me about the burial zone." Grand Empyrean nodded. Almost all the top powerhouses in the universe are gathered in the burial zone because there are many top-quality crystal mines and resources there. After reaching the Fate Realm, if you want to open a new realm, you will need a huge amount of cultivation resources. Therefore, that place is very cruel and there is often competition for resources, which are top-quality crystal mines. Yi Xian asked, "In other words, Fate Realm is the highest known realm?" Grand Empyrean smiled bitterly. "Before I met that senior, it was like that. But that senior," with that, he glanced at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, if I may ask, What is that senior's realm? Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. I don't know what level Qing has reached. Grand Emperor frowned. Young Master Yi doesn't know either. Yi Xian nodded. Grand Emperor was silent. He didn't expect that even Yi Xian didn't know what level the woman in the plain dress had reached. Yi Xian closed his eyes slowly. He sensed the 3 premium crystal mines in his body. By then, the 3 premium Supreme Heaven crystal mines had produced more than 10,000 premium Supreme Heaven crystals. This made Yi Xian a little excited, but he soon calmed down. Tens of thousands of top-quality crystal had been produced in a short period of time. It was a lot, but it was too little to break through to Fate Realm. Yang Nianxue had consumed more than 2 million Supreme Heavenly Crystals, and most of them were Supreme Heavenly Crystals. However, she did not show any signs of having a breakthrough yet. It would be very difficult to cultivate Xuwang to the life-knowing realm with just these 3 Sky Supreme Crystal Mines. Even if he could, it would take at least 1,000,000 years. At this moment, Grand Emperor suddenly said, Young Master Yi, we have arrived at Calming Soul City. Yi Xian looked into the distance and saw an ancient city in the distance. The entire city was gloomy and emitted a powerful soul aura. Grand Emperor introduced, Calming Soul City is the territory of a Fate Realm expert. His name is Yuhan, and he has a lot of influence in the burial zone. If we want to go to the burial zone, we have to use the Star Zone Transfer Array in Calming Soul City. It will save us a lot of time. Yi Xian looked at Grand Emperor. Will there be any trouble? Grand Emperor chuckled. What trouble? Could it be that they would dare to stop us? If they dare, we can just destroy Calming Soul City. Yi Xian. Grand Emperor smiled. Actually, I usually win people over with virtue. Yi Xian smiled. I can see that. Grand Emperor was a little embarrassed. Yi Xian smiled. Let's go. After they entered Calming Soul City, Yi Xian found that there was no one in the city. It was very, very deserted. Grand Emperor said, Yuhan is a soul cultivator. This place is actually a place for him to cultivate souls. He has raised a lot of souls for himself to devour. Yi Xian said softly, no wonder there are no living people here. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared before them. Grand Emperor clasped his hands. Brother Calming Soul, we are returning to the burial zone. We would like to borrow your Star Zone Transfer Array. Yuhan glanced at Yi Xian, and then he smiled, it's not a big deal. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and over a dozen enormous Star Zone Transfer Arrays suddenly appeared on his right. Grand Emperor gazed at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded and was about to leave. However, Yuhan suddenly said, young friend, wait a moment. Yi Xian turned around to look at Yuhan. Yuhan smiled, young friend, you have a Heaven Supreme Crystal Mine. And it's a top-grade one at that. Yi Xian frowned when he heard that. How could he know? Meanwhile, Grand Emperor's face fell, and he gazed at Yi Xian, let's go. Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked towards the Star Zone Transfer Array. Grand Emperor glanced coldly at Yuhan, and then he walked over as well. After Yi Xian and the others entered the Star Zone, a strange glow flashed through Yuhan's eyes, at least 3 top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines. Within the Star Zone, Yi Xian gazed at Grand Emperor. How did he know that I have 3 top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines? Grand Emperor smiled bitterly, he has a divine treasure that can detect the mines. I was careless. He hesitated for a moment and said, young Master Yi, you have to hide those 3 top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines. Otherwise, it might cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. That was because top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal ores were extremely precious even in the burial zone. It can be said that if 3 ownerless top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines suddenly appear in the burial zone, then countless life-knowing realm experts would go mad. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. As soon as he finished speaking, he asked Xiao Tu to seal the 3 top-grade Heaven Supreme crystal mines. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian asked, will Yu Hun cause trouble once he finds out that I have 3 top-grade Heaven Supreme crystal mines? Grand Empyrean spoke coldly, if he dares to cause trouble, then he'll be annihilated. Yi Xian smiled, Grand Empyrean, are you one of the mysterious powers in the burial zone? Grand Empyrean spoke proudly, the first. Yi Xian blinked, the first? Grand Empyrean was about to nod, but he seemed to have thought of something. He hesitated for a moment and said, we were the first before, but we aren't anymore. Yi Xian was puzzled, why? Grand Empyrean smiled embarrassedly, we encountered Senior Sichuan and offended her. Then. At this point, he didn't continue because he was filled with endless lingering fear. At that time, that woman had destroyed their headquarters, Heaven Soul Shrine, with a single swing of her sword. Just one swing of her sword. Not only had that swing of her sword destroyed Heaven Soul Shrine, but it had also killed 3 life-knowing realm experts. They weren't in the shrine at that time. If they were, they would be dead as well. It was too terrifying. Even now, Grand Empyrean felt a lingering fear in his heart. He hadn't felt so terrified since he'd attained the life-knowing realm. Hearing Grand Empyrean's words, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He understood. These Grand Empyreans had been taught a lesson by Qing Er. Indeed, those who had been taught a lesson by Qing Er would usually become humble and low-key. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Stand up. In the eyes of Qing Er, destiny knowers were like ants. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Damn it, do I really have to be the 2nd generation for the rest of my life? This is not the life I want. Yi Xian felt that he was in a bit of pain. As a 2nd generation, he was really in a bit of pain that others could not understand. P.S. I remember the explosion, I won't just bluff it away like this. Chapter 1940. Burial Zone. When Yi Xian followed the Grand Heavenly Venerate and the others to the burial zone, Yi Xian found that the spiritual energy in the burial zone was much purer than in other places. Along the way, the Grand Heavenly Venerate said, in this place, apart from the holy veins, the supreme-grade Heaven Supreme crystals are the rarest resources. And the conflicts and fights here basically all stem from fighting over these cultivation resources. Yi Xian said, I have 3 supreme-grade Heaven Supreme crystals on me. What level do they belong to here? The Grand Heavenly Venerate glanced at Yi Xian. Tycoon. Yi Xian, the Grand Heavenly Venerate said, Young Master Yi, after we go to the Sky Soul Temple, don't go out unless you have something important to do. Because Yuan Hun knows that you have the Heaven Supreme crystals on you. I'm afraid he'll cause trouble. Yi Xian smiled. Okay. As if thinking of something, he looked at the Grand Heavenly Venerate. Grand Heavenly Venerate, as far as I know, once you reach the life-knowing state, you can sense danger and avoid it. When you met Qing Er. The Grand Heavenly Venerate and the others looked embarrassed. Yi Xian asked with a smile, what's wrong? The Grand Heavenly Venerate smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, you're right. The life-knowing state can sense danger and avoid it. However, there were 2 special circumstances. The first was that we would meet someone much, much stronger than us. Your sister belongs to this category. The second is when we encounter danger, but it's too late to avoid it. Your sister belongs to this category. The moment she made her move, we were already doomed. Avoid it? It's too late. Yi Xian, the Grand Heavenly Venerate's smile became even more bitter. Yi Xian asked again, when the life-knowing state expert targeted me, didn't they sense danger? The Grand Heavenly Venerate glanced at Yi Xian, hesitated, and asked, Young Master Yi, your current strength. Yi Xian smiled and said, what I mean is, don't I have a younger sister behind me? Great Heavenly Venerate thought for a while before coming up with a more tactful wording. Young Master Yi, you are you. Your sister is your sister, in other words, your sister's strength has nothing to do with you. Yi Xian's expression froze. Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young Master, you really don't know what you're doing. Yi Xian was speechless. Soon, everyone arrived at the Heaven Soul Temple. The previous Heaven Soul Temple had been destroyed by the plain-dressed woman. This Heaven Soul Temple had been temporarily built by Grand Empyrean and the others. Revenge? Grand Empyrean and the others never had this thought. Damn it, he killed several life-knowing realm cultivators with a single slash, and he still wants revenge? How could he report it? At a time like this, anyone with a little bit of intelligence would know that they had to suck up to him and not take revenge. Grand Empyrean arranged a luxurious hall for Yi Xian. Not only that, but he also sent 2 life-knowing realm cultivators to guard him. In one of the halls, the Grand Empyrean and the other supreme experts of Heaven Soul Temple were gathered here. The Grand Empyrean spoke solemnly, Everyone, I have an idea. Everyone looked at the Grand Empyrean. The Grand Empyrean spoke softly, the Temple Master was eliminated, so we don't have a Temple Master now. So, I want to nominate a Temple Master. An old man smiled, Grand Empyrean, you're the strongest, so you should naturally be the Temple Master. All of us will accept you as the Temple Master. Everyone hurriedly nodded in agreement. However, the Grand Empyrean shook his head, I want young Master Yi to be the Temple Master. All the spectators were stunned when they heard this. The old man hesitated for a moment and said, Grand Empyrean, what do you mean? The Grand Empyrean spoke softly, if we want to suck up to that senior, then we must go through young Master Yi. All of them exchanged glances and remained silent. The Grand Empyrean continued, Everyone, we wouldn't even have the chance to come into contact with an expert like that plain-dressed woman, let alone receive guidance from her. However, we have a chance now. It's young Master Yi. Why didn't she kill us and instead showed us young Master Yi's portrait? It's very simple. It's because she wants us to follow young Master Yi. If I'm not wrong, then she wants to temper young Master Yi. If we follow young Master Yi and encounter her in the future, then just a little bit of guidance from her would be an opportunity to change our fates. All of them fell silent. The Grand Empyrean continued, if we don't have such a fortuitous encounter, then we might not be able to take a step forward even if we struggle for another 1,000,000 years. What do all of you think? After a long moment of silence, the old man said, we'll listen to the Grand Empyrean. The Grand Empyrean nodded, then we'll respect young Master Yi as the Temple Master. However, I need all of you to remember something. As he spoke, he glanced at everyone here and continued, we respect young Master Yi as the Temple Master, not to find a puppet. Since we respect him as the Temple Master, then we must really accept him as the Temple Master. After coming into contact with young Master Yi, we know that young Master Yi isn't a hypocrite. If we treat him sincerely, then he will treat us sincerely as well. I hope all of you remember that. All of them hurriedly nodded. The Grand Empyrean said, since no one has any objections, then we'll go see young Master Yi right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he led all of them away. All of you want me to be the Temple Master? Yi Xian was stunned when he found out why the Grand Empyrean had come here. Be the Temple Master? Yi Xian immediately shook his head, Grand Empyrean, I'm not strong enough to be the Temple Master. The Grand Empyrean smiled, you can. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, Grand Empyrean, I know what you mean. Your main objective is Qing-er. If I meet Qing-er, then I can ask her to give all of you some guidance. As for the position of Temple Master, The Grand Empyrean smiled, young Master Yi, our Heavenly Soul Shrine has 7 life-knowing realm experts and 12,000 origin soul realm experts. Besides that, we have 2 top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines and 2 million top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals. As he said this, he looked at Yi Xian. If you're willing to be the Temple Master, all of these are yours. You can assign them to you. Yi Xian. The Grand Empyrean continued, in order to survive in the burial zone, it's always good to have more people. Yi Xian fell silent. He naturally knew that the Grand Empyrean wanted to bind himself to him. Would it be bad for him? No. At the thought of this, Yi Xian smiled. Grand Empyrean, if I become your Temple Master, are you really willing to follow my orders? The Grand Empyrean quickly said, of course. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Good, I'll be the Temple Master. The Grand Empyrean was overjoyed. He quickly bowed respectfully. Greetings, Temple Master. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Grand Empyrean, how many top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals do I need to advance from the Primordial Spirit Realm to the Destiny-Knowing Realm? The Grand Empyrean thought for a while and said, it depends on the person. Some might need 3 million top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals, while others might need more. Of course, it might also be less. 3 million top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals. Yi Xian's face sank. Sister Xue had already devoured more than 2 million top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals. Obviously, it was still not enough. In other words, a conservative estimate would be that more than 1 million top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals were needed. Besides that, he still had to help Su Wang reach the Destiny-Knowing Realm. He was having a headache. Fortunately, the 3 Heavenly Supreme Crystal Mines in his small tower could produce quite a lot of Heavenly Supreme Crystals every month. Based on the time inside the small tower, a Heavenly Supreme Crystal Mine could produce thousands of Supreme-grade Heavenly Supreme Crystals every year. Of course, it didn't mean that the tens of thousands of Supreme-grade Heavenly Supreme Crystals could be used right away. It would take dozens of years before they could be condensed into useful Supreme-grade Heavenly Supreme Crystals. In other words, he would get thousands of top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals every few days. It was not a small amount. However, if he wanted to cultivate a cultivator to the Destiny-Knowing Realm, the rate of production was too low. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian looked at the Grand Empyrean and said, if you believe me, you can put the 2 top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystal Mines in your hands with me. I have Xiao Ta. The spacetime inside Xiao Ta is different from the outside. The Grand Empyrean said with a smile, of course I believe you, Temple Master. Please wait a moment, Temple Master. I'll go get it. With that, he turned around and left. In the palace, Yi Xian contacted Sister Xue who was still cultivating. Sister Xue, how long do you need to reach the Destiny-Knowing Realm? There was no response. Yi Xian was speechless. Soon, the Grand Empyrean came to Yi Xian. He took out a storage ring and handed it to Yi Xian. Temple Master, you must put this Heaven Supreme Crystal Mine in a place with spiritual qi as soon as possible. Otherwise, without the supply of spiritual qi, it won't be able to produce top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals. Yi Xian nodded and put away the storage ring. At this time, the Grand Empyrean said, Temple Master, there are millions of top-grade Heaven Supreme Crystals in the storage ring. Yi Xian looked at the Grand Empyrean and said with a smile, are you going to give me all the assets of the Heaven Soul Shrine just like that? The Grand Empyrean said with a smile, since we've appointed you as the Temple Master, we naturally have to respect you. He paused for a moment before he continued, Hall Master, I know that you might have other ideas, but you can rest assured that we didn't make you the Hall Master because we wanted to make you a puppet. We truly respect you. Of course, our purpose is also very simple. We hope you can lead us to a new height. Yi Xian said with a smile, for example, to reach the Destiny-Knowing Realm? The Grand Empyrean nodded quickly. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, I understand. As he spoke, he looked at the storage ring in his hand and smiled, I, Yi Xian, won't take advantage of you for nothing. The Grand Empyrean smiled and didn't say anything else. After a while, the Grand Empyrean left, and Yi Xian took out another 1,000,000 top-grade Heaven Supreme crystals and placed them next to Sister Shui. Besides that, he'd also asked Su Wang to start breaking through to the destiny-knowing realm. As for himself, he knew that based on his current condition, it was impossible for him to attain the destiny-knowing realm in a short period of time. However, Su Wang could. All he needed was money. Once Su Wang attained the destiny-knowing realm, he would be invincible amongst all destiny-knowing realm cultivators with the help of the Green Profound Sword. This world is too dangerous, so it's better to train a few more bodyguards. Of course, he needed to improve himself as well, and he wanted to attain the life physique realm first. Cultivate the life physique. In the next period of time, Yi Xian started to cultivate like crazy, and no one disturbed him in the Heaven Soul Shrine. Chapter 1941. Yi Xian had been cultivating for almost 100 years inside the Shao Ta, but only 10 days had passed in the outside world. Now, he had reached the life-flesh stage. His physical body had been greatly strengthened. In addition, he had become more and more adept at controlling the mysterious spacetime. Now, not only could he use the spacetime pressure of the mysterious spacetime, but he could also use the spacetime abyss of the mysterious spacetime. He also realized that the spacetime abyss of the mysterious spacetime was different from the spacetime abyss in the outside world. His intuition told him that even a life-knowing state powerhouse would not be able to escape from it easily. Of course, there was a problem. How could he send a life-knowing state powerhouse into the spacetime abyss of the mysterious spacetime? That was a problem. It was worth mentioning that Yang Nianshue's aura had finally changed. The aura that Yang Nianxue exuded had far exceeded the primordial spirit stage. Yi Xian knew that she was about to reach the life-knowing state. If she had not reached the life-knowing state, he would have collapsed. This was because Yang Nianxue had spent more than 3,500,000 supreme-grade supreme sky crystals since the beginning. If this went on, he would not be able to afford it. After a while, Yi Xian got up and left the small tower. He walked outside. The Heaven Soul Hall was located on a mountain peak. Below the mountain peak was an endless mountain range. At first glance, he could see all the mountains. Yi Xian looked down at the endless mountain range and smiled. Peace. This kind of peace was rare for him. Because along the way, he was either fighting or on his way to fight. It was rare for him to have this kind of peace. Now, he had no enemies. No one would come to mess with him anymore. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. The green mysterious sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He looked at the green mysterious sword in his hand and smiled brightly. With his current strength and the green mysterious sword, it was not impossible for him to fight a life-knowing state powerhouse, especially with the mysterious spacetime. At this time, the Grand Heavenly Venerate appeared next to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. Grand Heavenly Venerate, you came at the right time. I have just broken through, so I would like to exchange a few moves with you. The Grand Heavenly Venerate was stunned, then smiled. Okay. Let's go somewhere else. As he spoke, he and Yi Xian vanished on the spot, and when they appeared again, they'd arrived in a deathly silent starry sky. Grand Empyrean smiled and said, Temple Master, make your move. Yi Xian nodded. In the next moment, the green profound sword in his hand suddenly flew out. Grand Empyrean's eyes narrowed. What a fast sword. This was what Grand Empyrean was thinking. He didn't think too much and a powerful spacetime pressure appeared before him. He believed this spacetime pressure was enough to suppress Yi Xian's sword. However, his expression changed drastically in the next moment because Yi Xian's sword had directly disregarded his space. Grand Empyrean was shocked. He didn't have time to think and raised his arm to block. Boom! A ray of sword energy shattered and the Grand Empyrean was thrown into the mysterious abyss of time and space. The moment he entered the mysterious space-time abyss, Grand Empyrean's expression changed greatly. His hands pressed down and a powerful force swept out from his body. In an instant, the entire space-time abyss began to boil. However, his power wasn't enough to break the space-time abyss. Inside the space-time abyss, Grand Empyrean fell like crazy. His body began to dissipate bit by bit under the destruction of the space-time abyss. Grand Empyrean wasn't willing to give up and quickly used many different types of space-time power. However, all of his space-time power was useless inside the space-time abyss. At this moment, Grand Empyrean began to panic. He couldn't care about anything else and quickly looked at Yi Xian outside. If he didn't go out now, his body would completely disappear. Not only would his body disappear, but even his soul would disappear. He would be erased. Yi Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword flew into the space-time abyss and brought Grand Empyrean out. After coming out, Grand Empyrean let out a sigh of relief. He looked at Yi Xian with a face filled with disbelief. Temple Master, Yi Xian was actually a bit shocked. Because he didn't think that the moment the green profound sword touched Grand Empyrean, it would send him into the mysterious space-time abyss. It was sent, not sent. His guess wasn't wrong. Even a life-knowing realm cultivator would find it difficult to escape. However, he also knew that Grand Empyrean had underestimated his enemy. If Grand Empyrean hadn't underestimated his enemy and hadn't let the green profound sword touch him, he wouldn't have been sent into the mysterious spacetime abyss. Green profound sword. Yi Xian looked at the green profound sword in his hand. After pondering a bit, he walked up to Grand Empyrean and handed the sword to him. Grand Empyrean, take it. Grand Empyrean looked at Yi Xian. He didn't think much and grabbed the green profound sword. With a thought from Yi Xian, Grand Empyrean was sent into the mysterious spacetime abyss. Grand Empyrean was terrified. At this moment, the green profound sword brought him out. Grand Empyrean looked at Yi Xian with a face filled with disbelief. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth curled up. He found that as long as Grand Empyrean touched the green profound sword, he could send him into the mysterious spacetime abyss. What did this mean? It meant he could play dirty. Thinking about this, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh. Seeing how sinister Yi Xian's smile was, Grand Empyrean's expression became strange. This temple lord wasn't a good person. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian's smile suddenly disappeared. Enemy. Damn. I need enemies. Thinking about this, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He had gotten a bit carried away. At this moment, Grand Empyrean said, Temple Lord, that spacetime you just used. He was both fearful and curious about the mysterious spacetime Yi Xian had displayed. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and smiled. That was something Qing did for me. The woman in the plain dress. Grand Empyrean shook his head with a wry smile. No wonder, just as Yi Xian was about to speak, an old man appeared in front of Grand Empyrean. The old man was about to say something to Grand Empyrean when Grand Empyrean's expression turned cold. The old man was taken aback, then hurriedly looked at Yi Xian and bowed. Temple Lord, Martial Spirit City has sent an invitation. Yi Xian frowned. Martial Spirit City? Grand Empyrean quickly explained. Another super faction. Yi Xian looked at the old man and smiled. What invitation? The old man hurriedly handed over the invitation. Yi Xian opened it and frowned. Grand Empyrean looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian handed the invitation to Grand Empyrean. Grand Empyrean took the invitation and frowned. Yi Xian smiled. They invited me to Martial Spirit City. They said they found a ruin left behind by a hardship cultivator. Hardship cultivator. He had heard from Xiong Ho that the Yuan spirit realm was created by this person. He was a peerless genius. Grand Empyrean said solemnly, hardship cultivator. Yi Xian looked at Grand Empyrean and smiled. Tell me about this hardship cultivator. Grand Empyrean smiled bitterly. He really is a super genius. Since ancient times, his talent is second only to King Xiaofan. Yi Xian frowned. King Xiaofan? Grand Empyrean nodded. The one who created the life-knowing state. Yi Xian said softly, to create the life-knowing state, that's amazing. Grand Empyrean nodded. Very amazing. This hardship cultivator is also a genius among geniuses. A month after King Xiaofan reached life-knowing state, he also reached life-knowing state. In fact, he was on the verge of breaking through, but King Xiaofan was one step faster. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing. If it really is a relic left behind by the ascetic cultivator, then it must be extremely precious, because according to what I know, the ascetic cultivator controlled 12 saint veins and 68 premium crystal mines. Yi Xian blinked. That many supreme-grade crystal mines? Grand Empyrean smiled. The supreme-grade crystal mines are all right. The most precious are the saint veins. It can be said that one saint vein is equivalent to 10 supreme-grade crystal mines. Yi Xian's countenance changed upon hearing that. Grand Empyrean was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly asked, Grand Empyrean, outsiders don't know that I'm the Sky Soul Temple's Temple Master, right? Grand Empyrean shook his head. Outsiders don't know yet. Yi Xian thought about it and said, let's go to Martial Spirit City. But you're the Temple Master, and I'm your disciple. Understand? Grand Empyrean hesitated and said, Temple Master, you mean that I'm in the light, and you're in the dark? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Grand Empyrean thought about it and said, all right. Yi Xian smiled. Then I'll address you as Master from now on. Grand Empyrean roared with laughter. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Yi Xian set off for Martial Spirit City. On the way, Grand Empyrean introduced Martial Spirit City to Yi Xian. Martial Spirit City was established by a peerless expert, Wuxia. There were 12 people who attained the Destiny Knowledge Realm, and they were ranked according to the order in which they entered the Destiny Knowledge Realm. The first was King Xiaofan, the second was Ku Xiu, and Wuxia was ranked 9th. Although he wasn't as good as King Xiaofan and Ku Xiu, he was still a peerless expert. Yi Xian said solemnly, are King Xiaofan and Ku Xiu still alive or dead? Grand Empyrean shook his head. I don't know. They vanished after they attained the Destiny Knowledge Realm. As for where they went, no one knows. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Martial Spirit City said that they found a ruin left behind by Ku Xiu. Could it be a conspiracy? Grand Empyrean shook his head again. I don't know. Let's wait and see. We'll know when we reach Martial Spirit City. Yi Xian nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. The two sped up. Less than 2 hours later, the two of them arrived at Martial Spiritual City. Not far from the city gates stood a statue. Grand Empyrean looked at the statue and said, this is Wuxia, a powerhouse of the past. Yi Xian glanced at Wuxia's statue and didn't say anything. At this moment, an old man appeared before the two and bowed slightly to Grand Empyrean. Grand Empyrean smiled. I'm now the Sky Soul Temple Master. The old man smiled. Grand Empyrean, you must be joking. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. This young master Yi Xian, is the current Sky Soul Temple Master. Hearing this, Grand Empyrean's expression darkened. Martial Spirit City's target this time was Yi Xian? P.S. Scold me if you want, I also feel like I haven't been alone lately. You're the Palace Master of the Sky Soul Palace, Yi Xian. Yi Xian nodded and smiled. Yes. Zhang Man walked over to Yi Xian, sized up Yi Xian, and then frowned slightly. Divine Physique Realm? Yi Xian nodded again. Yes. Zhang Man looked at Yi Xian. There are only two explanations for being able to become the Palace Master of the Sky Soul Palace while at the Divine Physique Realm. The first is that you're a hidden big shot. But I took a look, and you're really only at the Divine Physique Realm. As soon as she finished speaking, she walked towards a seat at the side. Yi Xian was slightly curious. What's the second explanation? After Zhang Man sat down, she crossed her legs. You're a second generation that even the Sky Soul Palace wants to curry favor with. Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Linglong and Ku Pu glanced at Yi Xian, but they didn't speak. Actually, they were very curious about Yi Xian's identity as well. This guy was only at the Divine Physique Realm, but he could become the Palace Master of the Sky Soul Palace. How could he be simple? At that moment, Zhang Man said again, Palace Master Yi, let me ask you a question. You can answer, or you cannot. Yi Xian was about to speak when Zhang Man asked directly. The Sky Soul Palace was suddenly annihilated. Not only did a few life-knowing realm powerhouses perish, but even the Palace Master was wiped out. This matter is related to the person behind you, right? Yi Xian glanced at Zhang Man. Damn it. Why are the people I meet now all so intelligent? Zhang Man smiled. I know. Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Why don't you think that I did it? Hearing that, Ku Pu and Xue Linglong looked at Yi Xian again. Even the Great Desolation Elder opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. Zhang Man looked straight at Yi Xian. You did it? Yi Xian laughed. He walked to a nearby chair and sat down, but he didn't speak anymore. Strength was very important in the outside world, but when one's strength wasn't enough, one had to act cool to make up for it. In any case, acting cool wasn't against the law. Zhang Man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. So, Palace Master Yi isn't at the Divine Physique Realm? Yi Xian looked at Zhang Man and smiled. Miss Man, you don't mind if I call you that, right? Zhang Man was about to speak when Yi Xian spoke first. Miss Man, I knew that you're a forthright person since I met you. Actually, I quite like your character because I, Yi Xian, am a forthright person as well. What I mean is, if you're very curious about me, then we can talk in private. There are many people here now, and it's not convenient for me to say many things. You understand, right? Zhang Man was stunned, and then he laughed. Palace Master Yi, you're interesting, very interesting. Huh. Suddenly, a middle-aged man walked into the hall. Behind Yi Xian, the Grand Heavenly Venerate said, the current city governor of Martial Spirit City, Wuqing. After Wuqing entered the hall, he glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, Today, I have invited all of you here just as I said in the invitation. Our martial spiritual city has discovered a ruin left behind by an ascetic cultivator senior. However, Martial Spirit City is unable to open it, so I've gathered everyone here to think of a way. Zhang Man smiled. How do we split it if we open it? Everyone looked at Wuqing when they heard that. Wuqing smiled. We'll split it equally, of course. Of course, the prerequisite is that we can enter it. Split it equally. Zhang Man smiled and didn't speak. Meanwhile, Old Man Great Wilderness, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly said, City Governor Wuqing, the authenticity of the ruin. Wuqing smiled. Absolutely. Old Man Great Wilderness nodded slightly and didn't speak further. Meanwhile, Wuqing said, I won't waste any more time. Everyone, let's head to the ruin. As he spoke, he opened his palm and swept it lightly. In an instant, a teleportation array appeared before them. Wu Qing didn't waste any time and entered the teleportation array before him. Everyone in the hall exchanged glances. Meanwhile, Zhang smiled. Does Martial Spirit City intend to harm us? As soon as she finished speaking, she entered as well. It didn't take long for Xue Linglong and the others to enter as well. Behind Yi Xian, the Grand Heavenly Venerate said solemnly, Temple Master, this matter isn't as simple as it seems. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, return to Heaven Soul Temple and keep an eye on Martial Spirit City. As soon as he finished speaking, he entered the teleportation array. After a moment of silence, the Grand Heavenly Venerate turned around and left. 15 minutes later, Yi Xian and the others arrived at an unknown expanse of space, and they saw a hazy palace at the end of it. Wu Qing, who was in the lead, pointed at the palace. That palace is where the senior who once cultivated. Xue Linglong and the others looked at Ku Pu. This fellow was a descendant of the bitter cultivator, so he should be the most familiar with the ruin. Ku Pu looked at the palace, and after a moment, he shook his head. I can't be sure because after the ancestor left, there are very few records of him, even in my clan. Xue Linglong said, we can't go over. Wu Qing smiled, we can't. There are 36 mysterious spacetimes blocking our way, and each one is different. Some are even like a maze. As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled bitterly, it's too difficult. Spacetimes. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. Damn it. With the green profound sword and the mysterious spacetimes, what spacetimes couldn't he deal with? Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to crack them. If he exposed the green profound sword and the mysterious spacetimes now, he would be courting death. Keep a low profile. If one's strength was weak, it was better to keep a low profile. Meanwhile, Xue Linglong started walking towards the distance. She hadn't taken a few steps when the spacetime before her suddenly became illusory. She continued walking forward, and after around 15 minutes, her body suddenly became blurry. Zhang and the others frowned when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Xue Linglong retreated with a slightly pale face, and she looked towards the distance, the 26th spacetime. It's very complicated and very powerful. Wu Qing nodded. Our Martial Spirit City stops at the 26th spacetime as well. When he spoke up to this point, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Even if we crack the 26th spacetime, there are 10 even more powerful spacetimes behind it. The expressions of everyone here became solemn when they heard this. Meanwhile, Old Man Great Wilderness spoke abruptly. City Governor Wu invited Palace Lord Yi. I presume there's something extraordinary about him, right? All of them gazed at Yi Xian when they heard this. Yi Xian glanced at Old Man Great Wilderness and didn't speak. Wu Qing looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Palace Lord Yi is no ordinary person. As far as I know, Palace Lord Yi has a sword in your hand. This sword seems to be able to restrain the spacetime doctrine, right? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. City Governor Wu, my sword is indeed able to counter some spacetimes. However, that's only against ordinary spacetimes. The spacetime here was left behind by Senior Ku Xiu, so how could my sword possibly break through it? Wu Qing smiled, why don't you give it a try? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded, all right. As soon as he finished speaking, he started walking towards the distance. However, he hadn't even arrived at the 26th spacetime when he stopped because he'd been obstructed by the 9th spacetime. The expressions of Wu Qing and the others instantly became quite unsightly when they witnessed this scene. Is this fellow really an idiot? Meanwhile, Yi Xian had retreated. His forehead was covered in sweat, and his face was extremely pale. He seemed to be extremely weak. Yi Xian waved his hand repeatedly, it's too terrifying. I can't go in. I really can't. All of their expressions were quite unsightly. Damn it. I thought this fellow was a great god, but now it would seem like he's just an idiot. Meanwhile, Xue Linglong gazed at Yi Xian, is it because you can't go in, or you don't want to. Their expressions changed slightly when they heard this. Is Yi Xian putting on an act? Even if you can't pass through the 20th spacetime, it shouldn't be to the extent where you can't even pass through the 9th spacetime, right? Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Miss Xue Linglong, I'm only at the divine physique realm. Divine physique realm. Everyone's expressions were quite unsightly. Damn it. Are you really only at the divine physique realm? Xue Linglong fell silent for a moment, and then she said, Young Master Yi, forgive me for being blunt, but if you're really only at the divine physique realm, then why did you come here? Don't you know that everyone here is at least at the divine physique realm? Moreover, it's divine physique realm. Yet you're only at the divine physique realm. What gave you the confidence to come here? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, It was all of you who invited me here. Everyone looked at Wu Qing. Wu Qing fell silent for a moment, and then he said, I'm sorry, young Master Yi. I really didn't know you were so weak. I always thought you were a big shot. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.